Did you know that the earliest in-universe events of Five Nights at Freddy's predate the animatronics by decades, involving a shadowy 1940s diner that inspired Fredbear's? Most people think the story starts with a purple guy and a bite, but the real foundation was laid in an era of post-war America, in a place so obscure that even the most dedicated theorists only stumbled onto it years after the first game launched. This is a theory that never made it to the mainstream, buried under layers of more obvious lore, and it changes everything about how we understand the franchise. Because Five Nights at Freddy's isn't just a horror game about haunted robots, it's a decades spanning tragedy that begins in the 1940s and stretches all the way into the 2030s. A story where every location, every death, every haunting is connected by a chain of consequences that most players never see. The games show you fragments, moments frozen in time, nights spent locked in rooms with things that want to kill you. But between those nights, between those games, there's an entire hidden history, and within that history are theories so obscure, so buried in forgotten forum posts and abandoned Reddit threads that they've been lost to time. Theories about locations that were never named, about characters who appear for a single frame, about events that the creator hinted at once and never mentioned again. Some of these theories were proven wrong by later games. Some were quietly confirmed in ways that no one noticed. And some still sit in limbo, neither validated nor debunked, waiting for someone to connect the final dots. This is the story of those theories, the ones that slipped through the cracks, the ones that only a handful of people ever believed, the ones that reframe the entire timeline if you take them seriously. To understand any of it, we have to go back to the very beginning, and the very beginning isn't where you think it is. It's not 1983, not the bite, not even the first murder. It starts in the 1940s, in a diner that doesn't have a name in any game, that exists only in the margins of the lore, referenced in obscure minigames and blink and you miss it details that Scott Cawthon embedded like a time capsule. The theory goes like this: before Fredbear's Family Diner, before Henry and William ever met, there was another place, a small roadside diner somewhere in rural Utah, the kind of place that served coffee and pie to truckers and families on road trips. It wasn't special. It didn't have animatronics, but it had something else, something that caught the attention of a young man who would later become one half of the most destructive partnership in the franchise. That man was William Afton, though he wasn't Afton yet, not in the way we know him. He was just a kid, maybe a teenager, sitting in a booth, watching the owner of the diner interact with customers, watching the way people lit up when they walked in, the way the place felt like home. The diner had a mascot, not a robot, just a costume, a bear suit that the owner wore on weekends to entertain kids. It was cheap, handmade, probably falling apart at the seams, but it worked. The kids loved it. And William noticed. This is the origin point that almost no one talks about, the moment that planted the seed for everything that followed. Because William didn't invent the idea of using mascots to draw in families. He stole it. He saw it work in this little diner, saw the way a man in a bear suit could make children feel safe, could make parents open their wallets, and he filed it away. Years later, when he met Henry Emily, when they started talking about opening a family restaurant, William already had the blueprint. He knew exactly what they needed: a mascot, a bear, something that felt friendly, that felt safe, that could get close to children without raising suspicion. Henry designed the animatronics, the engineering, the artistry, but the concept, the soul of it, came from that diner in the 1940s. And here's where the theory gets darker. Some believe that the owner of that diner didn't just inspire William. Some believe he was William's first victim. Not a child, not yet, but an adult. Someone who had something William wanted. The diner closed suddenly, according to this theory, sometime in the late 1940s or early 1950s. That's no explanation. The owner disappeared. The building sat empty for years before being torn down. And William Afton, now a young man with a growing obsession, moved on. He joined the military, or he went to college, or he did whatever it is that people did in the 1950s when they were trying to look normal. But he never forgot that diner. He never forgot the bear. By the 1970s, William had a family, a respectable life, and a business partner named Henry Emily. Together, they opened Fredbear's Family Diner, a small restaurant in Hurricane, Utah, with two Springlock animatronics, Fredbear and Spring Bonnie. This is where the story most people know begins. But if the Shadow Diner theory is true, then Fredbear's wasn't the beginning. It was the echo. William had been waiting decades to build this, to recreate what he saw as a teenager, but better, more controlled, more his. Henry thought they were partners. William knew better. He was the one who understood what the mascots were really for, not entertainment, access. And so Fredbear's opened, and it was a success, and families came, and children laughed, and underneath it all, William was learning. He was watching, he was waiting. The diner ran for years, from the early 1970s up until 1983, and during that time, William perfected his craft. He learned how the Springlock suits worked, how to wear them, how to use them to get close to kids without anyone questioning it. He learned the layout of the building, the blind spots, the places where no one would see. He learned how to smile, how to wave, how to be exactly what parents wanted to see. And then, in 1983, everything fell apart. Not because of William, not yet, because of his own son. The bite of 83, the moment that's been analyzed 1,000 times, happened at Fredbear's. A child, the crying child, William's youngest son, was shoved into Fredbear's mouth by his older brother and a group of bullies. The Springlock jaw closed. The child's head was crushed. He died days later in a hospital. This is canon. But here's a theory that never gained before Freddy Fazbear ever sang a note. Before the name Afton meant anything to anyone, there was a diner that shouldn't have existed, and the things that happened there set everything else in motion. We're going back to the early 1940s now, to a time when America was just pulling itself out of the Great Depression and the world was tearing itself apart overseas. Most people were focused on rationing, on war bonds, on whether their sons would come home from Europe. So when a small diner opened up on the outskirts of a quiet Utah town, featuring something nobody had ever seen before, it felt like a glimpse of the future, a good distraction. The place didn't even have a proper name at first. Locals just called it the Diner with the Robots, or sometimes the Singing Machine Place. What made it special was sitting right there on a small stage in the corner. Crude mechanical entertainers, animatronics, though that word didn't really exist yet. These weren't the polished, family-friendly characters we'd come to know decades later. These were rough, almost handmade-looking figures built from whatever materials the inventor could scrounge together during wartime scarcity. Metal frames wrapped in fabric and foam, painted faces that didn't quite look right, eyes that caught the light in ways that made you look twice. The inventor himself was a ghost. No one knew his real name. He didn't advertise, didn't put his face on anything, didn't glad hand the customers. He worked in a back room that employees were told never to enter, and he'd emerge only to make adjustments to his creations or to watch them perform from the kitchen doorway. Some folks said he was European, maybe fleeing the war. Others thought he was just a local eccentric with a knack for engineering. What everyone agreed on was that he was brilliant. These machines moved. They turned their heads, raised their arms, opened their mouths in something close to speech. For 1940s technology, built by one man in a backroom workshop. This was borderline miraculous. The diner became a local attraction almost immediately. Families would drive out on Sunday afternoons to watch the show. The animatronics would perform simple routines, mostly pantomime with some musical accompaniment from a phonograph the inventor had rigged into the system. Kids loved it. Parents tolerated it. The food was decent enough, standard diner fare, nothing special. But you weren't there for the food. Then the strangeness started. It was small things at first, the kind of things you dismiss if you were trying to be reasonable. Patrons sitting near the stage reported that the animatronics would sometimes move when they weren't supposed to be moving. A head would turn slightly between shows. An arm would twitch. One regular swore she saw one of the figures blink, actually blink, even though the eyelids were supposed to be fixed in place. The inventor would brush off these reports, explaining that the mechanisms were still being refined, that pneumatic systems could settle and shift, that springs had tension memory. Perfectly normal for experimental technology. But the sounds were harder to explain. Late night employees, the ones closing up after the dinner rush, reported hearing the animatronics make noises when they were powered down. Not mechanical noises, vocalizations, soft murmuring sounds that almost formed words. One waitress quit after she heard what she described as a child's voice coming from inside one of the figures, asking for help. The inventor dismissed her as hysterical, said the phonograph system sometimes played fragments of recordings when the wiring got crossed. No one could prove otherwise. The first disappearance happened in the spring of 1943. A local boy, 8 years old, visited the diner with his parents on a Saturday afternoon. The place was packed. The kid was obsessed with the animatronics, had been begging to come back for weeks. His parents let him sit up close to the stage while they finished their coffee at a booth near the back. Standard stuff. Safe. Except when his mother looked up, he was gone. They searched the diner top to bottom. The inventor opened his workshop, let the police look through everything. They checked the bathrooms, the storage closets, the walk-in freezer. They searched the property outside, the parking lot, the empty lots on either side. The boy had simply vanished. No witnesses saw him leave. No one saw anyone take him. He was there, and then he wasn't. The police investigation went nowhere. There was no evidence of foul play, no signs of struggle, no ransom note. The inventor cooperated fully, seemed genuinely disturbed by what had happened. The case went cold within weeks. But the rumors started immediately. Parents whispered to each other at church, at the grocery store. Something was wrong with that place. Something had taken that boy. Business dropped off sharply after that. The diner went from packed on weekends to nearly empty most nights. The inventor tried to salvage things, offered discounts, added new routines to the animatronics repertoire. It didn't matter. Parents had made up their minds. The place was cursed or haunted or worse. The eerie atmosphere that had once been charming novelty now felt genuinely threatening. Those crude, mechanical faces that had seemed whimsical now looked predatory. The way the animatronics moved, jerky and imprecise, now seemed less like technological limitation and more like something trying to break free of its constraints. Local authorities kept the case open but couldn't justify continued surveillance. They'd found nothing. The inventor had no criminal record, no history of violence, no connection to the missing boy. Legally, there was nothing to hold on to. But the sheriff at the time, a man named Hollis, kept a file. He didn't believe in coincidences, and he didn't like the way the inventor looked at people. Too calculating, too detached. That's when the whispers about the inventor's past started circulating. No one could pin down specifics, but stories emerged. Someone claimed he'd worked in a hospital before the war, that he'd been let go under mysterious circumstances. Another rumor suggested he'd been involved in some kind of research, experimental stuff, the kind of thing that didn't get published in journals. A traveling salesman passing through town swore he'd seen the inventor years earlier in another state, going by a different name, and that there'd been trouble there too. Missing children, a fire. Nothing proven, but enough smoke to make you wonder about the fire. The accidents started that summer. Small malfunctions at first. An animatronic's arm would swing too far, too fast, nearly hitting a customer. Another time, one of the figures toppled forward off the stage, crashing into an empty table. The inventor would apologize, make repairs, assure everyone that he was working out the kinks. But the accidents kept happening. A waitress got her hand caught in one of the mechanisms while cleaning near the stage, crushed 3 fingers. She said the animatronic had grabbed her, that the hand had closed around hers deliberately. The inventor said the pneumatic system had misfired. The insurance company paid out, and the waitress left town. Employees who stayed, the ones who needed the work badly enough to ignore the rumors, reported the worst of it. After hours, when they were cleaning up or doing prep work for the next day, they'd hear whispers coming from the stage area. Not the phonograph, not the animatronic's recorded dialogue. Real whispers, human whispers, coming from inside the machines, and shadows. Multiple employees reported seeing shadowy figures moving through the diner after closing, human shaped but wrong somehow, too tall or too thin, or moving in ways that didn't match how people moved. One cook claimed he saw a shadow standing behind one of the animatronics, as if it were wearing the mechanical body like a suit. When he looked directly at it, it was gone. When the second child disappeared, everything changed. The first case had been tragic, yes, but isolated incidents happen. People grieve, they mourn, and eventually life moves on. But two children vanishing from the same location within months of each other, that turned tragedy into pattern, and pattern meant danger. The community erupted. Parents who had once brought their families to the diner every weekend now stood outside with handmade signs demanding answers. The local newspaper, which had run cheerful advertisements for the establishment just weeks earlier, now published front page editorials calling for immediate closure. Town council meetings devolved into shouting matches. Mothers refused to let their children walk past the building. Fathers organized patrols. The police, already stretched thin by the investigation into the first disappearance, found themselves fielding dozens of calls every day from terrified residents convinced they'd seen something suspicious near the diner, heard something strange, noticed someone lurking. The owner found himself in an impossible position. Every day the diner remained open was another day of protests, another wave of accusations, another round of threatening phone calls in the middle of the night. His staff quit one by one, unwilling to be associated with a place that had become synonymous with child endangerment. Revenue had already plummeted after the first incident, but now it dried up completely. No customers meant no income. No income meant no way to pay rent, utilities, suppliers. The mathematics of the situation were brutally simple, so he made the only decision he could. The diner would close immediately. No grand farewell, no final weekend of service, no attempt to salvage the business or rebrand under a new name. Just a locked door and a hastily written sign that read, "Closed until further notice." Though everyone understood there would be no further notice, this was the end, but closing the doors didn't solve the owner's problems. It actually created new ones, because now he had to figure out what to do with the animatronics. These weren't simple machines he could sell to another restaurant or donate to a children's hospital. These were the centerpieces of 2 missing children cases. Evidence, potentially, or at the very least, symbols of something terrible. The police had already examined them during both investigations and found nothing conclusive, no blood, no hidden compartments containing bodies, no mechanical malfunctions that could explain the disappearances. But that didn't mean people weren't watching. The owner knew that if he tried to move the animatronics openly, If he loaded them onto a truck in broad daylight, the community would lose what little restraint it still had. They'd assume he was destroying evidence. They'd assume guilt. So he did it quietly. Late one night, after the streets had emptied and the protesters had gone home, the owner returned to the diner with a small truck and a single trusted associate. They disconnected the animatronics from their power sources, dismantled them into transportable pieces, and loaded everything into the vehicle: the bear, the rabbit, the smaller companion characters, all the servos and wiring and endoskeleton components, every piece. Then they drove to a location the owner had secured days earlier, a storage space whose address he shared with no one, not his family, not his lawyer, not even the police when they later came asking. He locked the animatronics away in that secret place and tried to convince himself that would be the end of it. It wasn't. The diner's closure didn't bring peace to the community. It brought something worse: uncertainty, lingering dreads, the kind of fear that festers when questions go unanswered, because the two children were still missing. The investigations had gone cold. No arrests had been made. No bodies had been found. And now the one physical location that connected both cases, the one place people could point to and say something happened there, was just an empty building with soap-smeared windows and a growing collection of dead leaves piling up against the door. Nature abhors a vacuum, and so does human psychology. When official answers don't materialize, unofficial ones rush in to fill the void. The rumors started small: whispered conversations between neighbors, speculation shared over backyard fences. But they grew. They mutated. They took on lives of their own. Though animatronics were haunted, that was the prevailing theory, possessed by the spirits of the missing children, or perhaps by something older and darker that had been waiting in that building long before the diner opened. People claimed they'd seen the characters moving through the windows even after the power had been shut off. Others swore they'd heard singing coming from inside the locked building, childlike voices performing the diner's signature songs at 3 in the morning. A delivery driver reported seeing glowing eyes staring out from the kitchen area. A teenager dared by his friends to touch the front door said he felt a cold hand grab his wrist from the other side, though when they looked, there was no one there, and the door was still locked. Were these stories true? Probably not. Most of them, anyway. Fear makes people see things. Trauma makes communities create shared narratives to process what they can't understand. But true or not, the stories spread, and they had consequences. Then the inventor vanished. The man who had built the animatronics, who had poured his creativity and technical skill into making those characters move and perform and entertain, simply disappeared. One day he was there, the next he was gone. His workshop stood empty. His apartment was abandoned mid-month, rent unpaid. His few friends and colleagues reported that he'd seemed increasingly paranoid in the weeks following the diner's closure, muttering about mistakes he'd made, design flaws he should have caught, things he'd seen that he couldn't explain. He left behind papers, lots of them, blueprints, technical schematics, pages and pages of handwritten notes that documented every aspect of the animatronics construction. But mixed in with the legitimate engineering documents were other things, stranger things, diagrams that showed modifications never actually implemented, notes about behavioral anomalies and unexplained activations, sketches of the animatronics' faces with the eyes crossed out or scribbled over, and on several pages, repeated again and again in increasingly frantic handwriting, a single phrase: "They're not supposed to do that." What wasn't supposed to happen? The inventor never clarified. He was gone, and no one knew where. Some believed he'd fled out of guilt, that he knew something about the disappearances and couldn't live with the knowledge. Others thought he'd suffered a mental breakdown, that the tragedy had shattered his sanity. A few whispered that he hadn't left at all, that something had taken him, the same something that had taken the children. The diner became a cautionary tale. Parents used it to frighten their children into obedience. Stay close to me, or you'll end up like those kids from the Shadow Diner. That's what people started calling it, the Shadow Diner, a place where light had failed, where innocence had been stolen, where something wrong had taken root. The building itself stood empty for years, too tainted for anyone to lease, too connected to tragedy for the owner to sell. It became a landmark of local horror, the place teenagers dared each other to approach on Halloween, the subject of badly written poems in high school literary magazines. But the diner's influence didn't end with its closure, because the idea behind it, the core concept of animatronic entertainment for children, that didn't die. If anything, the notoriety made people more curious. Other entrepreneurs, watching from other towns and cities, saw the crowds the diner had drawn before the tragedies. They saw the potential. They thought maybe with better security, better management, better luck, the concept could work, could thrive. So new ventures emerged, new diners, new restaurants, new family entertainment centers featuring their own animatronic performers. The most notable of these would be Fredbear's Family Diner, an establishment that would take the basic template the Shadow Diner had pioneered and expand it, refine it, turn it into something bigger, something that would eventually spawn an entire franchise, and those original animatronics, the ones the owner had locked away in that secret location, they didn't stay hidden forever. Rumors persisted for years that they'd resurfaced, that someone had found them, purchased them, restored them, that they'd been installed in new establishments, performing for new audiences, their dark history unknown to the children who watched them sing and dance. Some claimed to have seen them, recognized them despite new paint jobs and modified features. Others said the animatronics had been destroyed, melted down, or buried, but that their essential wrongness, whatever had made them dangerous, had somehow transferred to the new generations of performers. The cycle, it seemed, was just beginning. So we've seen the shadow origins, the abstract blueprint of what would become a nightmare. Now we need to talk about when it all became real, when the doors actually opened and the machines started moving. Sometime in the early 1970s, a small family diner opened its doors in Hurricane, Utah. It was called Fredbear's Family Diner, and on the surface, it looked like any other roadside restaurant trying to carve out a niche in the growing American suburbs. But this place had something different. Two animatronic characters stood on a small stage in the dining area, a yellow bear named Fredbear and a golden rabbit called Spring Bonnie. They sang, they moved, they entertained kids while families ate pizza and burgers. It was novel, it was charming, and it worked. The diner was the brainchild of two men who would go on to define everything that followed: Henry Emily and William Afton, partners, friends, at least in the beginning. Henry was the engineer, the creator, the one who could look at springs and endoskeletons and wiring and see something that could move like it was alive. He built Fredbear and Spring Bonnie from scratch, designing them to be more than just stationary props. These weren't department store mannequins. They had articulated limbs, pneumatic systems, voice boxes that could sync to pre-recorded tracks. For the early 70s, this was cutting edge. Henry poured himself into those machines, and you could see it in the way they moved, fluid and surprisingly lifelike for the era. William Afton handled the other side, the business side, marketing, finances, operations, the stuff that kept the lights on and the doors open. He was charismatic in a way Henry wasn't. He could talk to investors, schmooze with suppliers, shake hands, and make people believe this little diner was going somewhere. And he was right. Fredbear's Family Diner became a hit almost immediately. Families loved it. Kids were mesmerized by the animatronics. Parents appreciated that their children were entertained while they could sit and actually finish a meal. The diner filled a gap in the market that nobody had realized was there, and within a few years, Fredbear's wasn't just surviving, it was thriving. But while Henry saw the animatronics as art, as a way to bring joy to children, William saw something else. He became obsessed with the technology in a way that went beyond business interest. He started spending more and more time in the back rooms, tinkering with the mechanisms, studying how the servos and hydraulics worked, how the metal frames held together under stress. Henry thought it was just enthusiasm, maybe even a shared passion. It wasn't. William was fixated on something deeper. He was trying to understand how these machines could mimic life. And more than that, he was starting to wonder if they could contain it. This is where things get dark, and they get dark fast. At some point in the late 70s, the first known murder happened. A child went missing from Fredbear's family diner. The details are murky, the way they always are when someone with power wants them to be, but the broad strokes are clear. William Afton lured a child away from the main dining area, outside the building, away from witnesses, and he killed them. The exact method isn't confirmed in the earliest records, but what matters is this was deliberate. Premeditated, the child was taken, murdered, and their body was hidden. This wasn't a crime of passion or an accident. William Afton, co-founder of a family entertainment venue, had just committed the first in what would become a long string of child murders. The incident was covered up, not by police, not by investigators, but internally. By William, certainly, and the evidence suggests Henry was involved too, whether he knew the full truth or not. There was no public acknowledgement, no missing persons report that gained traction, no investigation that led anywhere. The child simply vanished from the record, and Fredbear's family diner kept operating. This is one of the most chilling aspects of the early timeline, the fact that the very first death was successfully buried, which meant William learned something critical. He learned he could get away with it. But something else happened, something William didn't predict and couldn't have planned for. The murdered child's soul didn't move on. It stayed, and it latched onto one of the animatronics, most likely Fredbear himself, the mascot, the golden bear that stood at the center of the diner's brand. The child's spirit, trapped between life and death, bound itself to the machine. This was the first possession, the first time a haunted animatronic came into existence. And while William wouldn't fully understand what he'd done for years, this moment marked the beginning of the supernatural thread that would weave through every location, every incident, every tragedy that followed. The animatronic haunting phenomenon, as it would later be understood, started here. A murdered child's soul inhabiting a mechanical shell. The animatronic didn't behave differently at first, or if it did, the changes were subtle enough to dismiss. A twitch here, a movement that didn't quite sync with the programming. But the seed was planted. The barrier between the living and the machine had been breached, and it would only get worse. During this same period, William Afton made another breakthrough, though calling it a breakthrough feels wrong given what it enabled. He created the Spring Bonnie suit, not just an animatronic, but a wearable one. This was a hybrid design, something that could function as both a standard animatronic on stage and as a costume that a person could climb inside and wear. The technology was called a spring lock mechanism. It worked by using tightly wound springs to hold the animatronic parts, the metal endoskeleton, the joints, the framework, in a compressed position against the walls of the suit. When the spring locks were wound and locked into place, a person could safely fit inside, and the suit would function as a costume. When the locks were released, the animatronic parts would snap back into their default positions, and the suit would operate as a standard robot. It was ingenious. It was also incredibly dangerous. The spring locks were under constant tension, and if they failed, if they got wet or jostled or simply wore out, they would release. And if someone was inside the suit when that happened, The metal endoskeleton would snap inward with enough force to crush bone and puncture organs. But William didn't care about the danger. He cared about the utility, because the spring Bonnie suit gave him something it's invaluable. It gave him a disguise. He could wear the suit, walk around the diner as a beloved character, and children would come to him willingly. They'd trust him, follow him, and he could lead them wherever he wanted. The diner's reputation started to shift. It was subtle at first, the kind of thing that spreads through whispers rather than headlines. Parents started talking. A child had gone missing, hadn't they? Or maybe it was just a rumor. Maybe the kid had run away, or the family had moved. But the unease was there, lingering in the background like a stain that wouldn't wash out. Attendance didn't collapse, but it plateaued. The crowds thinned. Birthday parties were booked less frequently. Fredbear's Family Diner, which had been the hottest family destination in Hurricane just a few years earlier, was now a place some parents actively avoided. And through it all, William Afton kept experimenting, kept watching, kept learning. Because he discovered something that fascinated him more than money or success or partnership ever could. He'd found a way to make death stick around. William's family was no stranger to the diner. His eldest son, Michael Afton, was a regular presence there, often dragging along his younger brother, Evan Afton. Michael was the kind of teenager who thrived on cruelty disguised as humor, the type who saw his little brother's fear as entertainment rather than something to protect. Evan, on the other hand, was small, fragile, and terrified of nearly everything the diner had to offer. He became known among fans as the Crying Child, a nickname that stuck because it captured exactly what he was, a boy who spent most of his time at Fredbear's in tears. Evan's fear of the animatronics wasn't just typical childhood nervousness, it was deep, visceral, the kind of terror that kept him awake at night. Fredbear in particular haunted him. The golden bear with its wide, unblinking eyes and frozen grin became the centerpiece of Evan's nightmares. We see this fear play out in the minigames of Five Nights at Freddy's 4, where Evan is constantly crying, hiding, trying to avoid the animatronics at every turn. His father's creations, the very things that brought joy to other children, were a source of unrelenting dread for his own son. This wasn't just about a kid being scared of a mascot. Something about the animatronics felt wrong to Evan, something he couldn't articulate but could sense on an instinctual level. Whether he had witnessed something he shouldn't have, or whether his father's increasingly dark obsession had bled into the household atmosphere, Evan's fear was rooted in something real. Michael, meanwhile, found his brother's terror hilarious. He and his friends, a group of teenagers who wore masks of Freddy, Bonnie, Chica, and Foxy, made it their mission to torment Evan. They'd chase him through the diner, corner him, shove the animatronic heads in his face, while he screamed and begged them to stop. It was bullying, plain and simple, but it was also something darker. Michael wasn't just picking on a sibling. He was weaponizing his brother's deepest fear for his own amusement, and no one stopped him. William Afton had a daughter, too. Elizabeth Afton was younger than Michael, but older than Evan, and unlike her terrified brother, she was drawn to the animatronics with an almost obsessive fascination. But her interest wasn't in Fredbear or Spring Bonnie. Elizabeth had become fixated on a character that hadn't yet appeared at the diner, Circus Baby. Circus Baby was part of a new line of animatronics William was developing, more advanced than anything at Fredbear's. She was designed to be beautiful, lifelike, with a voice that could sing and eyes that could track individual children in a crowd. William had poured his engineering genius into her, creating something that felt less like a mascot and more like a person. Elizabeth adored her. She begged her father to see Circus Baby, to be near her, to play with her. William, for reasons he kept to himself, repeatedly told Elizabeth to stay away. He warned her over and over, but he never explained why. This would matter later. This would matter in the worst possible way. But before Elizabeth's story reached its tragic conclusion, another disaster struck the Afton family. It happened in 1983 at Fredbear's Family Diner during what should have been a celebration. Evan's birthday party, the Bite of 83. This is one of the most infamous events in the entire Five Nights at Freddy's timeline, a moment that changed everything for the Afton family and for Fazbear Entertainment as a whole. Michael and his friends decided to play one final prank on Evan. They cornered him in the main dining area, grabbed him while he kicked and screamed, and carried him toward the stage where Fredbear was performing. Evan was hysterical, sobbing, begging them to stop. The other kids at the party watched. The parents watched. No one intervened. Michael and his friends lifted Evan up, higher and higher, until they were holding him directly in front of Fredbear's face. They shoved his head into the animatronic's mouth. It was meant to be a joke, a scare, the ultimate punchline to years of tormenting their little brother. But Fredbear's jaw closed. The spring lock mechanism inside the suit, the same dangerous system that allowed the animatronics to double as wearable costumes, malfunctioned. Or maybe it didn't malfunction. Maybe it just did what it was designed to do when pressure was applied in the wrong place. Either way, Fredbear's jaws clamped down on Evan's head with enough force to crush bone. The sound, described in whispers and secondhand accounts, was something no one in that room would ever forget. Blood, screaming, chaos. The animatronic's mouth opened again, either manually or through some automatic response, and Evan's limp body was pulled free. His skull was fractured, his brain exposed. He was still breathing, but barely. Evan was rushed to the hospital. He spent days in a coma, hooked up to machines, while his family waited. William sat by his bedside. Michael, consumed by guilt, could barely look at what he'd done. The mini-games in Five Nights at Freddy's 4 show us these final moments, Evan's fading consciousness, represented by a plushie of Fredbear that speaks to him in a distorted, comforting voice. "I will put you back together," the plushie says. It's cryptic, haunting, and it's never been entirely clear who or what is speaking. Some believe it's William, trying to console his dying son. Others think it's something else, something supernatural already taking root in the world of Fazbear Entertainment. Either way, the promise went unfulfilled. Evan Afton died from his injuries. He was buried, mourned, and became the first of many child victims connected to Freddy Fazbear's animatronics. The Bite of 83 didn't just destroy the Afton family, it destroyed Fredbear's Family Diner. The public outrage was immediate and overwhelming. Parents demanded answers. How could a child be killed by a mascot? How could this happen at a family restaurant? The media swarmed. Investigators combed through the diner's safety records, maintenance logs, and employee files. Fazbear Entertainment, still a relatively small operation at this point, was blindsided. Henry Emily tried to manage the crisis, issuing statements, promising reforms, but the damage was done. No amount of public relations could undo the image of a child's head being crushed inside an animatronic's mouth. Fredbear's Family Diner closed its doors permanently. The building was abandoned. The animatronics were packed away, and the dream that Henry and William had built together came to an abrupt, bloody end. William Afton's response to his son's death was not grief in any normal sense. It was something colder, more twisted. He blamed the animatronics, not himself for building them, not Michael for the prank. He blamed the machines as if they had acted with intent, as if they were responsible. This marked a turning point in William's psychology. He had always been obsessed with his creations, but now that obsession curdled into something darker. He began to see the animatronics not as tools or entertainment, but as something that needed to be punished, controlled, understood on a level that went beyond mechanics. His experiments, which had already crossed ethical lines, became more extreme. He started to ask questions that no sane engineer would ask. What happens to a soul when the body dies? Can consciousness be preserved? Can it be transferred? His son's death didn't break him, it gave him a new purpose. Henry Emily saw the change. He watched his partner spiral, saw the obsession take hold, and he began to suspect that William's involvement in the missing children incident, the one that had occurred shortly before Evan's death, was not coincidental. Henry didn't have proof, not yet, but he had instincts, and those instincts told him to distance himself. The partnership that had built Fredbear's family diner began to fracture. Henry pulled back, focusing on damage control and planning for whatever came next. William, meanwhile, retreated into his work and into his private experiments, into the darkness that would define the rest of his life. The closure of Fredbear's family diner marked the end of the first era of Fazbear Entertainment. The original dream was dead, but the brand, the characters, the animatronics themselves, they weren't finished. Henry Emily, determined to salvage something from the wreckage, began planning a new venture, bigger, safer, more profitable. He would open a new location, one that learned from the mistakes of the past, one that could restore the public's faith in Freddy Fazbear and his friends. That new location would be called Freddy Fazbear's Pizza, and it would become the centerpiece of the horror that followed. In 1983, Fazbear Entertainment opens its first flagship location, Freddy Fazbear's Pizza. This is the moment the franchise goes mainstream, where Fredbear's family diner was intimate, experimental, almost homemade in its charm. Freddy Fazbear's Pizza is designed to scale. Bigger dining room, more tables, a proper stage with curtains and spotlights, and 4 brand new animatronics built specifically for this location. Freddy Fazbear himself, the top-hatted brown bear with the microphone and the friendly smile, Bonnie the guitar-playing rabbit in his signature bow tie, Chica the yellow chicken with her cupcake companion, and Foxy the pirate, a red fox with an eye patch and a hook hand who performs from his own separate stage area called Pirate Cove. William Afton is the mastermind behind the animatronics. He's not just a co-founder of Fazbear Entertainment anymore. He's the lead engineer, the designer, the man who understands the spring lock mechanisms and the endoskeletons and the servo motors better than anyone else alive. Henry Emily handles the creative vision, the storytelling, the family-friendly atmosphere. But William builds the machines, and William understands how they move, how they think, how they can be controlled. This is important because it means so he knows their vulnerabilities, he knows their blind spots, he knows how to wear them. The restaurant becomes wildly successful almost immediately. Parents love it because it's affordable, and the kids are entertained for hours. The animatronics perform songs, they interact with the audience, they move around the stage with a fluidity that's genuinely impressive for early 1980s robotics. Birthday parties are booked weeks in advance. The arcade machines in the back room are always occupied. The pizza is, by all accounts, mediocre at best, but no one cares. The kids aren't there for the food. They're there for Freddy and his friends. Fazbear Entertainment is printing money. But William Afton is not a normal man. He's charming when he needs to be. He's brilliant, no question. But there's something deeply, fundamentally wrong with him. And in the success of Freddy Fazbear's Pizza, he sees opportunity, not for profit, for something darker. He begins to plot. He watches the children move through the restaurant, unattended, distracted, trusting. He watches the parents sit in the dining area, backs turned to the hallways and party rooms. He watches the security cameras, or more accurately, the gaps in their coverage. He's learning the patterns. He's mapping the blind spots, and he's thinking about how easy it would be to lure a child away from the crowd if you were wearing something they trusted, something like a giant yellow rabbit costume. Then, in 1983, something happens that changes everything. The bite of 83. This doesn't happen at Freddy Fazbear's Pizza. It happens at Fredbear's Family Diner, the original location, the sister restaurant that's still operating alongside the new flagship, and the victim is William Afton's own son, the crying child. This is the younger of Afton's two sons, a boy who's terrified of the animatronics, who has nightmares about them, who begs his father not to make him go near them. His older brother, Michael Afton, is a teenager, a bully, someone who thinks it's funny to scare his little brother. On the crying child's birthday, Michael and his friends decide to play a prank. They pick the kid up, they carry him toward the stage, and they shove his head directly into Fredbear's mouth, right between the animatronic's spring-locked jaws. While the bear is still active, the bite comes down, hard, the spring locks fail, the mechanical jaw clamps shut with enough force to crush bone. The crying child's frontal lobe is destroyed. There's blood, there's screaming, the whole restaurant goes into chaos. The boy is rushed to the hospital, but the damage is catastrophic. He lingers for days, flatlined and unresponsive, while his father sits at his bedside, and then he dies. Fredbear's Family Diner closes immediately after the incident. Health inspectors swarm the location. Lawyers get involved. The press has a field day. Fazbear Entertainment takes a massive reputational hit, and the scrutiny on their animatronics becomes intense. Parents start asking questions. Are these machines safe? Who's monitoring them? What kind of company lets a child get bitten in half by a robot bear? The answer, of course, is a company that prioritizes profit over safety, that cuts corners on maintenance, that uses volatile spring-lock technology in active entertainment settings. But Fazbear Entertainment doesn't say that. They issue a statement, they promise reforms, they keep Freddy Fazbear's Pizza open, and William Afton, grieving father, brilliant engineer, co-founder of the company, does not become more cautious. He becomes worse. The death of his son does not humanize him. It breaks something. There's a theory, and it's well supported by later revelations in the games, that Afton becomes obsessed with the idea of life after death, that he starts to believe, maybe because of guilt, maybe because of arrogance, that death is a problem he can solve, that consciousness can be preserved, that a soul can be bound to something physical, something mechanical, if the circumstances are right. And if that's true, then the animatronics aren't just machines anymore. They're vessels, they're opportunities, and the only way to test that theory is to create more deaths. So in 1985, 2 years after his son's death, 2 years after the bite of 83, William Afton puts his plan into action. He takes the spring Bonnie suit, the same kind of wearable animatronic costume that he and Henry used in the early days of Fredbear's, and he puts it on. It's a bulky, dangerous piece of equipment. The spring locks inside have to be manually wound back to make room for a human body, and if they fail, if they snap back into place, they'll impale the person inside with dozens of metal rods and gears. But Afton knows how to use it. He's done it before, and more importantly, he knows that children trust it. They see a giant yellow rabbit, and they see a friend. They see a character from the show. They don't see a threat. He lures them one by one. The exact method varies depending on which version of the story you follow, which minigames you trust, but the core is always the same. He uses the suit. He uses his authority as an employee, maybe even as the owner. He tells them there's a special surprise in the back room. He tells them to follow him, and they do, because they're children, because they trust adults, because they trust Spring Bonnie. 5 children, that's the count. 5 kids at Freddy Fazbear's Pizza in 1985, lured into a back room, a storage area, a place with no cameras and no witnesses, and murdered, the missing children incident. This is the event that defines the entire 5 nights at Freddy's timeline. Everything that happens after this, every haunting, every animatronic attack, every night guard who dies in that building, it all traces back to this moment. To William Afton in a spring Bonnie suit with a knife and 5 children who never came home. The bodies are hidden inside the animatronics, Afton knows the machines inside and out. He knows there's space in the endoskeletons, in the torso cavities, in the hollows behind the mascot shells. He stuffs the bodies inside Freddy, Bonnie, Chica, Foxy, and according to some accounts, a fifth animatronic, possibly Golden Freddy, a mysterious spare suit that doesn't perform on stage. It's a brutal, methodical process. And it works. The bodies aren't discovered, not immediately. The children are reported missing. Their parents call the police. Search parties are organized, but no one thinks to look inside the animatronics. Why would they? They're entertainment robots. They're beloved characters. They're not crime scenes. But something happens that William Afton does not predict. The children's souls do not move on. They do not fade. They stay. They bind to the machines. Possession. This is the supernatural core of Five Nights at Freddy's. The spirits of the murdered children, trapped in the animatronics, unable to rest, unable to leave, begin to exert influence over the machines. The animatronics gain sentience, not in a programmed way, in a haunted way. They start to move when they shouldn't. They stare at staff members. Their eyes follow people across the room. Their heads turn when no one's operating them. The behavior is erratic, unpredictable, and deeply unsettling. Staff members notice. Of course they notice. The animatronics are acting wrong. Bonnie wanders off stage during the day. Foxy's curtain in Pirate Cove opens on its own. Freddy's eyes glow in the dark when the power's cut. Chica stands in the kitchen at night, staring at the door. Employees start refusing to work the closing shift. Some quit outright. The ones who stay start talking. They say the robots are haunted. They say the building is cursed. Management dismisses it. Fazbear Entertainment has a policy, and it's a policy that will define the company for decades. Deny, deflect, and keep the doors open. The animatronics are just malfunctioning. It's a software glitch. It's the humidity affecting the servos. It's nothing. Get back to work. Then the smell starts. A foul, creeping odor that emanates from the animatronics themselves. It's worst around Freddy and Bonnie, but all of them have it to some degree. A rotting organic smell, decay. Customers complain. Parents pull their kids away from the stage. Health inspectors are called in. They examine the animatronics. They look for the source. They find moisture, discoloration, strange stains inside the suits. But they don't find bodies, not yet. The inspections are surface level. The animatronics are too valuable to dismantle completely. Fazbear Entertainment pushes back. They clean the suits. They spray them down with disinfectant. They install air fresheners around the stage. And they insist the restaurant is safe. It's not safe. The animatronics are possessed by the spirits of murdered children, and those spirits are angry. They don't understand what happened to them. They don't know they're dead. All they know is that they were hurt, that they were betrayed, and that the adults around them did nothing to stop it. So they lash out, they wander, they watch, and they wait for someone who looks like the man who killed them. Someone in a uniform, someone working the night shift, someone alone. So here's where things take a turn. By 1985, Freddy Fazbear's Pizza was already on shaky ground, but it was about to get much worse. Health inspectors arrived for a routine check, and what they found was anything but routine. The animatronics, the heart and soul of the restaurant, were hiding a gruesome secret. Decaying bodies stuffed inside them by William Afton had begun to decompose. The stench was unbearable, and the discovery was horrifying. This wasn't just a violation of health codes, it was a nightmare. The inspectors immediately shut down operations, and word spread fast. Parents were outraged, the community was in shock, and Freddy Fazbear's Pizza went from a beloved family spot to a house of horrors overnight. Public backlash was swift and brutal. Families who once flocked to the pizzeria for birthday parties and arcade games now avoided it like the plague. The restaurant's reputation as a safe, fun place for kids was shattered. Parents protested outside, demanding answers, and the media latched onto the story, turning it into a national scandal. Fazbear Entertainment, the company behind the restaurant, was in full damage control mode. They tried to downplay the incident, blaming the odors on poor sanitation and claiming the rumors of bodies were exaggerated, but the damage was done. Trust was broken, and customers weren't buying it. As attendance plummeted, the restaurant struggled to stay afloat. Revenue dried up, and the staff faced constant harassment from angry patrons and reporters. The animatronics, already malfunctioning, became even more unpredictable. Their erratic behavior escalated, and soon they weren't just wandering the halls at night, they were attacking staff members. Employees reported being bitten, scratched, and even cornered by the machines. It was as if the animatronics were lashing out, driven by something more than just faulty programming. The restaurant became a hazardous workplace, and morale hit rock bottom. Fazbear Entertainment tried to salvage the situation, but their efforts were half-hearted at best. They issued statements denying any wrongdoing and insisted the animatronics were safe. Behind the scenes, though, they were scrambling to cover up the truth. They knew the bodies inside the animatronics were evidence of William Afton's crimes, but exposing him would mean admitting their own negligence. So they stayed silent, hoping the scandal would blow over. It didn't. The pressure mounted, and by late 1985, they had no choice but to close Freddy Fazbear's Pizza for good. The doors were locked, the lights turned off, and the era of the original pizzeria came to an end. William Afton, the man behind the murders, managed to evade justice. As the investigation unfolded, he disappeared, going into hiding to avoid arrest. His crimes were never officially linked to him, at least not publicly. He remained a shadowy figure, his name whispered in connection to the tragedy, but never proven. Meanwhile, the animatronics were taken off stage and stored in a back room, their fate uncertain. Fazbear Entertainment considered scrapping them, but the cost of replacing them was too high, so they sat in storage, gathering dust, their secrets buried with them. But the story didn't end there. The spirits of the murdered children, trapped inside the animatronics, refused to rest. They lingered, driven by anger and a desire for vengeance. The animatronics' erratic behavior wasn't just glitches, it was the children, trying to break free, trying to make their voices heard. Their presence turned the machines into something more than just entertainment. They became vessels of pain and retribution, haunted by the lives cut short within them. As Freddy Fazbear's Pizza faded into memory, Fazbear Entertainment began plotting their next move. They knew they couldn't let the brand die, not after investing so much into it. But they also knew they needed to distance themselves from the tragedy. So they started planning a rebranding effort, a fresh start that would erase the stains of the past. They talked about new locations, new characters, and new safety measures. But the shadow of what happened at the original pizzerias loomed large, and their attempts to move forward were met with skepticism. In the community, the events at Freddy Fazbear's Pizza became urban legends. Parents warned their kids about the haunted pizzeria, and teenagers dared each other to sneak into the abandoned building. The story of the missing children and the haunted animatronics spread, growing more elaborate with each retelling. Some dismissed it as a cautionary tale, while others believed there was truth to the rumors. The pizzeria became a symbol of fear, a place where innocence was lost and darkness lurked. The closure of the original Freddy Fazbear's Pizza marked the end of an era, but it also set the stage for what was to come. Fazbear Entertainment's attempts to rebrand would lead to new locations, each with its own tragedies and mysteries. The animatronics, are stored away but not forgotten, would resurface in unexpected ways. And William Afton, still at large, would continue to haunt the story, his actions casting a long shadow over everything that followed. This was just the beginning. The fall of Freddy Fazbear's Pizza wasn't the end. It was the first domino in a chain of events that would shape the future of Fazbear Entertainment and the world of Five Nights at Freddy's. The spirits of the children, the haunted animatronics, and the man who started it all were all pieces of a puzzle that was far from complete. And as the timeline moves forward, the stakes only get higher, the mysteries deeper, and the darkness more pervasive. But for now, this chapter closes, leaving behind a legacy of fear, loss, and unanswered questions. The story of Freddy Fazbear's Pizza is over, but its echoes will be felt for years to come. The year was 1987, and Freddy Fazbear's Pizza was back. Not just back, bigger, brighter, and supposedly better. After the disaster of the first location, the company decided to shake off the bad press and start fresh. This wasn't just a reopening, it was a rebranding. The new Freddy Fazbear's Pizza was marketed as a new and improved family entertainment center, complete with cutting-edge technology and a shiny new cast of animatronics. But as we'll see, new and improved doesn't always mean safer. In fact, it often means the opposite. The star attractions this time around were the toy animatronics: Toy Freddy, Toy Bonnie, Toy Chica, Mangle, and Balloon Boy. These weren't just updates to the old designs, they were entirely new characters, built with a sleek, modern aesthetic. Toy Freddy, Toy Bonnie, and Toy Chica were bright, colorful, and cartoonish, designed to appeal to kids. Balloon Boy, on the other hand, was smaller and creepier, often lurking in the shadows. And then there was Mangle, a twisted, fragmented version of Funtime Foxy, which we'll get to in a moment. These animatronics weren't just for show, they were equipped with advanced facial recognition technology, supposedly to enhance security. But as we'll see, this technology had a dark side. The original animatronics, Freddy, Bonnie, Chica, and Foxy, weren't retired though. They were refurbished and repurposed as backup animatronics in the new location. These older models were stored in the back rooms, kept out of sight but still operational. They looked different now, though, more weathered, more menacing. Their designs had been altered, giving them a more unsettling appearance. It's unclear why the company decided to keep them around, but it's possible they were too expensive to replace entirely. Either way, their presence in the new location would prove to be a critical factor in the events that followed. Enter Jeremy Fitzgerald, the new night guard hired to keep an eye on things. Jeremy was just an ordinary guy, looking for a job, and he probably didn't think much of the position when he applied. But he quickly learned that working at Freddy Fazbear's Pizza wasn't like any other job. His first clue? The phone guy. Every night, Jeremy would receive calls from this mysterious figure, who provided instructions and warnings about the animatronic's behavior. The phone guy's tone was calm, almost casual, but his words were anything but reassuring. He warned Jeremy that the animatronics were prone to wandering at night, and that they might mistake him for an endoskeleton, a robotic skeleton without its costume, and try to stuff him into a spare Freddy suit. Not exactly a warm welcome. The phone guy also explained the new security measures in place, including the toy animatronics facial recognition technology. This system was supposed to identify potential threats by scanning the faces of everyone who entered the building. If it detected someone who wasn't in the database, it would flag them as a security risk. Sounds great in theory, right? But there was a catch. The system wasn't perfect. It could malfunction, misidentify people, or even be tampered with. And as Jeremy would soon discover, the animatronics weren't just looking for intruders, they were targeting adults. Reports of missing children began to resurface around this time, casting a dark shadow over the new location. Parents were terrified, and rumors of foul play started to spread. Some people suspected that the animatronics were involved, while others pointed fingers at the staff. The company, of course, denied any wrongdoing and insisted that the new location was safe. But the truth was far more complicated. The animatronics weren't just malfunctioning, they were acting with purpose, and that purpose seemed to be tied to the missing children. Jeremy's nights at Freddy Fazbear's Pizza became increasingly hostile. The animatronics, both old and new, were becoming more aggressive. Toy Freddy, Toy Bonnie, and Toy Chica would roam the halls, their bright colors contrasting sharply with their menacing behavior. Balloon Boy, though smaller and less overtly threatening, had a knack for sneaking into the security office and disabling Jeremy's equipment. And then there was Mangle. Originally known as Funtime Foxy, Mangle was designed to be a take apart and put back together attraction. Basically, a puzzle for kids to disassemble and reassemble. But over time, Mangle became a twisted, disheveled mess, its parts scattered and its appearance horrifying. It was unpredictable, crawling on the ceiling and attacking without warning. Jeremy had to constantly monitor its movements, knowing that one wrong move could be his last. The phone guy continued to guide Jeremy through his shifts, offering tips and warnings as the situation escalated. He explained that the animatronics were more active at night because their free roaming mode was activated after hours. He also mentioned that the older animatronics, Freddy, Bonnie, Chica, and Foxy, were becoming increasingly hostile, possibly due to their outdated programming. But there was something else going on, something darker. The animatronics weren't just malfunctioning, they seemed to be driven by something beyond their programming. They were hunting, and Jeremy was their prey. As the nights wore on, Jeremy began to notice patterns in the animatronics' behavior. They were drawn to the security office where he spent most of his time. They would stare at him through the windows, their eyes glowing in the darkness. Sometimes, they would try to force their way in, forcing Jeremy to quickly close the doors or use his flashlight to ward them off. The tension was unbearable, and Jeremy knew he couldn't keep this up forever. But he had no choice. He had to survive the night. The situation reached a boiling point when Jeremy encountered the puppet, a mysterious animatronic that hadn't been mentioned before. The puppet was different from the others. It was lean, ghostly, and seemed to float rather than walk. It didn't attack Jeremy directly, but its presence was deeply unsettling. The phone guy eventually explained that the puppet was an older animatronic, one that had been around since the early days of Freddy Fazbear's Pizza. It was said to be linked to the missing children, though the specifics were unclear. All Jeremy knew was that the puppet was watching him, and that its intentions were far from friendly. The final straw came on Jeremy's last night on the job. The animatronics were more aggressive than ever, and Jeremy was barely holding on. Then, without warning, the power went out. The security cameras went dark, the doors stopped working, and Jeremy was left completely vulnerable. He could hear the animatronics moving closer, their footsteps echoing in the darkness. He knew he was out of time. What happened next is unclear. Some believe Jeremy was attacked, while others think he managed to escape. But one thing is certain. His experience at Freddy Fazbear's Pizza changed him forever. The events of 1987 marked a turning point in the history of Freddy Fazbear's Pizza. The new location, once hailed as a fresh start, became another chapter in the company's long list of failures. The toy animatronics, despite their advanced technology, proved to be just as dangerous as their predecessors. And the mystery of the missing children only deepened, leaving more questions than answers. But this wasn't the end, far from it. The story of Freddy Fazbear's Pizza was just getting started, and the next chapter would be even darker. So 1987 rolls on, and things at Freddy Fazbear's Pizza are starting to unravel. The puppet, that enigmatic animatronic from the first location, is still lurking in the background. It's not just a prop, it's active, almost sentient, moving around on its own. Employees report seeing it in places it shouldn't be, and there's this eerie feeling that it's watching. Watching what, exactly? Well, that's the question. The puppet's role in all this is cryptic, but it's clear it's tied to the missing children's incident. There are hints, cryptic messages in the animatronics programming, sightings of it near the backstage area. It's as if it's trying to protect something or someone, but protection comes at a cost, and the puppet's presence only adds to the growing unease. Then comes the Bite of 87. It's the event that changes everything. During the day, when the restaurant is open and full of kids, one of the animatronics attacks an employee. The details are murky. Was it one of the toy animatronics or one of the originals? But the result is gruesome. The victim suffers severe injuries, particularly to the frontal lobe. This isn't just an accident, it's a full blown assault, and it's daytime when the animatronics are supposed to be safe. Naturally, this sparks panic. Parents are horrified, employees are terrified, and the public outcry is immediate. Freddy Fazbear's Pizza can't recover from this. The toy animatronics, the shiny new models designed to be safer and more appealing, are the first to go. They're decommissioned due to safety concerns. But here's the kicker: the original animatronics, the ones from the first location, aren't faring any better. They've been refurbished, given new suits, and updated systems, but their erratic behavior persists. They're unpredictable, sometimes aggressive, and no one can figure out why. So they're retired too. Freddy Fazbear's Pizza is left with nothing: no animatronics, no draw for customers, and no way to recover its reputation. By the end of 1987, Freddy Fazbear's Pizza closes its doors again. The Bite of 87 is the final nail in the coffin. The company tries to downplay it, of course. They release statements about how the animatronics are being phased out and how safety is their top priority. But the damage is done. The public isn't buying it. The restaurant's closure marks the end of Freddy Fazbear's Pizza's second attempt at revival, and it leaves behind a legacy of mystery and tragedy. But the story doesn't end there. The missing children's incident, that dark cloud hanging over the franchise, is officially investigated. Police comb through the restaurant, interview employees, and examine the animatronics. But they find nothing conclusive. No bodies, no evidence, just rumors and whispers. The investigation goes cold, and the case remains unsolved, but the puppet's involvement is hinted at. There are reports of it being seen near the scene, and cryptic messages in the animatronics programming suggest it knows more than it's letting on. It's as if the puppet is the keeper of secrets, the guardian of the truth. But what that truth is, no one knows. Meanwhile, Phone Guy, the ever-present voice of Freddy Fazbear's Pizza, records new training tapes for future employees. These tapes are a window into the chaos of 1987. He talks about the animatronics' erratic behavior, the safety protocols, and the Bite of 87. But there's a sense of resignation in his voice, like he knows the ship is sinking. He even mentions how the animatronics have been acting up, and how employees should avoid being alone with them. It's chilling, especially when you realize these tapes are meant for a future that might never come. The closure of the 1987 location marks the end of an era. Freddy Fazbear's Pizza's second attempt at revival is a failure, and the company is left in shambles. But the legacy of 1987 lives on. The Bite of 87 becomes a cautionary tale, a reminder of the dangers lurking beneath the surface of the animatronics. The puppet's role in the missing children's incident remains a mystery, but its presence is undeniable, and the investigation into the missing children's incident, though inconclusive, leaves behind a trail of questions. What really happened to those kids? Who or what is responsible? And what role did the animatronics play in it all? As the dust settles, one thing is clear. Freddy Fazbear's Pizza story is far from over. The events of 1987 are just one chapter in a much larger, darker narrative. The puppet, the animatronics, the missing children, they're all pieces of a puzzle that's still being put together. And as the timeline moves forward, the pieces start to fall into place, revealing a story that's as haunting as it is compelling. So, what happens next? Well, that's where things get even more complicated. The closure of the 1987 location isn't the end, it's just the beginning of a new chapter in the Freddy Fazbear's saga. The puppet's role becomes more defined, the animatronic's origins are explored, and the missing children's incident takes on new significance. But that's a story for another time. For now, 1987 remains a turning point, a moment when the cracks in Freddy Fazbear's Pizza's facade finally give way, revealing the darkness beneath. And so, the timeline moves forward, carrying with it the weight of 1987. The puppet, the animatronics, the missing children, they're all part of a larger narrative, one that's still unfolding. The events of 1987 are just the beginning, a prelude to the mysteries that lie ahead. And as the story continues, the pieces of the puzzle start to come together, revealing a picture that's as complex as it is chilling. But for now, 1987 remains a pivotal moment, a year that changed everything. The bite of 87, the closure of Freddy Fazbear's Pizza, the puppet's mysterious role, they're all part of a larger story, one that's still being written. And as the timeline moves forward, the events of 1987 take on new meaning, becoming a key piece in the puzzle that is Freddy Fazbear's Pizza's dark and twisted history. So as we leave 1987 behind, we're left with more questions than answers. What really happened during the bite of 87? What role did the puppet play in the missing children's incident? And what's next for Freddy Fazbear's Pizza? These are the questions that drive the narrative forward, pulling us deeper into the mystery. And as the timeline continues, the answers start to emerge, revealing a story that's as haunting as it is compelling. But that's a story for another time. For now, we're left with the legacy of 1987, a year that changed everything. The bite of 87, the closure of Freddy Fazbear's Pizza, the puppet's mysterious role, they're all part of a larger narrative, one that's still unfolding. And as the timeline moves forward, the pieces of the puzzle start to come together, revealing a picture that's as complex as it is chilling. So what's next? Well, that's where the story takes a darker turn. The events of 1987 are just the beginning, a prelude to the mysteries that lie ahead. And as the timeline continues, the pieces of the puzzle start to fall into place, revealing a story that's as haunting as it is compelling. But that's a story for another time. For now, we're left with the legacy of 1987, a year that changed everything. And as the timeline moves forward, the events of 1987 take on new meaning, becoming a key piece in the puzzle that is Freddy Fazbear's Pizza's dark and twisted history. By the 1990s, Freddy Fazbear's Pizza had begun its second act, a smaller, budget-friendly version of the once grand franchise. This wasn't the sprawling pizzeria of the 1980s. It was a scaled-down operation, a desperate attempt to keep the Fazbear name alive. The original animatronics, Freddy Fazbear, Bonnie the Bunny, Chica the Chicken, and Foxy the Pirate Fox, were still the stars of the show, though their once pristine appearances had begun to show signs of wear. The restaurant itself was a shadow of its former self, but it was here, in this unassuming location, that the story of Five Nights at Freddy's truly began to take shape. The animatronics were still a marvel of engineering, programmed with advanced AI to entertain children during the day. They could sing, dance, and interact with guests in ways that felt almost lifelike. But at nights, things changed. To conserve power, The animatronics were set to roam freely, moving through the restaurant on their own. It was an efficient system designed to keep costs low, but efficiency would soon take a back seat to something far darker: the missing children incident. It's a phrase that echoes through the lore of FNAF, and for good reason. Around this time, 5 children were lured into the back room of Freddy Fazbear's Pizza by a man in a Spring Bonnie suit. Spring Bonnie was one of the older animatronic designs, a relic from the franchise's earlier days. The man inside the suit was William Afton, co founder of Fazbear Entertainment and the architect of so much suffering. Afton's motives were twisted, his methods chilling. He promised the children a party, a celebration, but what awaited them was something far more sinister. One by one, they were murdered, their lives cut short in a room filled with animatronic parts and broken dreams. What Afton didn't account for was the power of their souls. The children didn't just disappear, they lingered, their spirits bound to the animatronics they had once admired. Freddy, Bonnie, Chica, and Foxy became vessels for their anger, their pain, their desire for justice. The animatronics, once designed to bring joy, were now haunted, their programming overridden by the restless souls within. During the day, they still performed their routines, entertaining the children who came to the pizzeria. But at night, they roamed with a new purpose: to exact revenge on anyone who crossed their path. The missing children incident didn't just haunt the animatronics, it haunted the restaurant itself. News of the tragedy spread quickly, and Freddy Fazbear's Pizza was soon embroiled in scandal. Parents were understandably wary, and business began to decline. The pizzeria struggled to stay afloat, its reputation tarnished by the dark events that had unfolded within its walls. But Fazbear Entertainment was nothing if not resilient. They downplayed the incident, attributing the rumors to overactive imaginations and unreliable sources. They even went so far as to claim the animatronics were simply malfunctioning, their aggressive behavior the result of faulty programming. It was a flimsy excuse, but it was enough to keep the doors open, for now. Enter Phone Guy. He wasn't just a technician, he was a lifeline for the struggling restaurant. Hired to maintain the animatronics and train new employees, Phone Guy quickly became a familiar voice to anyone who worked the night shift. His recordings, meant to guide new hires through their first week, were a mix of reassurance and caution. He explained the basics: how to monitor the cameras, how to conserve power, how to survive until 6 a.m. But he also warned about the animatronics. "They'll try to get into your office," he said, his tone calm but firm. "If they do, you won't survive." It was a chilling statement, one that hinted at the danger lurking in the shadows. Phone Guy's role would evolve over time. He started as a technician, but he eventually took on the role of night guard himself. It was a risky job, one that required nerves of steel and a willingness to face the unknown. Phone Guy's recordings suggest he survived his shifts, but barely. His voice grew more strained as the nights went on, his warnings more urgent. He knew firsthand what it was like to face the animatronics, and he wanted to prepare others for the same ordeal. Which brings us to Mike Schmidt, hired as the night guard at Freddy Fazbear's Pizza. Mike was the protagonist of the first 5 nights at Freddy's game, though his true identity and motivations remain a topic of debate among fans. What we do know is this: Mike worked 5 consecutive nights at the pizzeria, facing the haunted animatronics head-on. His job was simple in theory: monitor the cameras, conserve power, and survive until morning. But in practice, it was a nightmare. The animatronics weren't just malfunctioning machines, they were predators, hunting Mike with a single-minded focus. Freddy would emerge from the shadows, his eyes glowing in the darkness. Bonnie lurked in the hallways, his guitar silent but his presence menacing. Chica wandered near the kitchen, her bib stained and her beak clicking unnervingly. And then there was Foxy, who would sprint down the hallway in a burst of speed, forcing Mike to act quickly or face the consequences. Each animatronic had its own patterns, its own strategies, but they all shared one goal: to reach the office. Mike's survival depended on his ability to outwit them. He had to monitor the cameras constantly, keeping track of their movements and closing the office doors at just the right moment. But power was limited, and every action drained the reserves. If the power ran out, the doors would fail, leaving Mike defenseless. It was a tense, nerve-wracking experience, one that captured the essence of the Five Nights at Freddy's franchise. What made the situation even more unsettling was the animatronics' behavior. They weren't just aggressive, they were unpredictable. Sometimes they would move slowly, almost cautiously, as if testing Mike's defenses. Other times, they would strike without warning, forcing him to react in a split second. And then, there were the moments when they seemed to stare directly into the cameras, their eyes glowing with an eerie intelligence. It was as if they knew Mike was watching, as if they were playing a game with him. By the fifth night, the tension reached its peak. The animatronics were relentless, their movements more aggressive than ever. Mike's survival seemed almost impossible, but somehow he made it through. Whether it was skill, luck, or something else entirely, he endured. But his victory, if you could call it that, was short-lived. The animatronics were still haunted, the spirits of the murdered children still trapped within their metal frames. And Freddy Fazbear's Pizza, despite its best efforts, was still a place of darkness. This was just the beginning of Mike Schmidt's story, though. His time at Freddy Fazbear's Pizza would have far-reaching consequences, setting the stage for the events that would follow. But for now, the focus remains on the pizzeria itself, a place where joy and horror coexisted in a delicate, unsettling balance. The 1990s were a pivotal era for the franchise, a time when the seeds of the Five Nights at Freddy's saga were planted. And as we'll see, those seeds would grow into something far more complex and far more terrifying. By the third night, Mike Schmidt, the night guard, begins to notice something deeply unsettling. The animatronics aren't just malfunctioning anymore, they're hunting him. Freddy Fazbear, once the star of the show, becomes the most dangerous of them all. Unlike Bonnie and Chica, who roam the halls relentlessly, Freddy waits. He hides in the shadows, watching. When the power dips low and the lights flicker, that's when he strikes. Freddy's behavior is methodical, almost intelligent, and it's clear he's not just following a broken programming loop. He's stalking Mike, waiting for the perfect moment to pounce. This isn't just a glitch, it's personal. Mike starts piecing together the animatronics' patterns. They move unpredictably, but there's a logic to it. Bonnie lingers near the left door, Chica near the right, and Freddy lurks in the darkness of the dining area. They're avoiding the cameras, hiding in blind spots, and moving when Mike isn't looking. It's as if they know they're being watched. Mike realizes these machines aren't just haunted, they're aware. They're hiding their movements, conserving their energy, and planning their attacks. This isn't random, it's coordinated, and it raises a chilling question. What exactly is controlling them? On night 4, the situation takes a dark turn. Mike receives a phone call from the phone guy, the voice he's come to rely on for guidance. But this time, something's wrong. The phone guy sounds nervous, even panicked. He warns Mike about the animatronics' behavior, explaining that they've become more aggressive at night. He mentions something about how they perceive any adult in the building as a threat, mistaking them for someone else. Then, mid-sentence, the call cuts off. There's a crash, the sound of screams, and then silence. Mike is left staring at the phone, realizing what just happened. The phone guy is dead, killed by the very animatronics he was warning Mike about. It's a sobering moment. If the phone guy couldn't survive, what chance does Mike have? The phone guy's final message leaves Mike with a critical piece of information. The animatronics are driven by something more than programming. They're acting on instinct, fueled by a deep seated rage or fear. Mike begins to suspect the truth that these machines are haunted by the spirits of the murdered children from the missing children incident years earlier. The animatronics aren't just malfunctioning, they're vessels for vengeful souls, trapped and lashing out at anyone they perceive as a threat. This realization changes everything. Mike isn't just fighting animatronics, he's fighting ghosts. Night 5 is a test of endurance. The animatronics are relentless, and Mike's resources are stretched thin. Power management becomes a matter of life and death. Every second the lights are on drains the limited power supply, and every second they're off risks an animatronic sneaking into the office. Mike has to juggle monitoring the cameras, closing the doors, and conserving power, all while Freddy looms in the shadows, waiting for his moment. It's a high stakes game of cat and mouse, and one wrong move could be fatal, but Mike survives, barely. By the end of the night, he's exhausted, but he's alive. He's made it through the worst of it, or so he thinks. The next day, Mike is called into his manager's office. He's fired. The reason? Tampering with the animatronics and odor. It's a vague and frustrating explanation, but Mike knows the real reason. He's been digging too deep. His investigation into the animatronics' haunted nature has made him a liability. The management doesn't want anyone uncovering the dark secrets of Freddy Fazbear's Pizza, so they cut him loose. Mike's firing marks the end of his time at the restaurant, but it's far from the end of his involvement with Fazbear Entertainment. If anything, it's only the beginning. Meanwhile, the restaurant's financial struggles worsen. The incidents involving Mike and the animatronics are just the latest in a long line of problems. The public perception of Freddy Fazbear's Pizza has been deteriorating for years thanks to the missing children incident, the rumors of hauntings, and the general creepiness of the animatronics. Parents don't want to bring their kids there, and the few customers who do come are often met with a less than welcoming atmosphere. The restaurant is hemorrhaging money, and the management can't keep up with the mounting costs. It's a slow, inevitable decline, and by the mid-1990s, Freddy Fazbear's Pizza is on the brink of collapse. The final nail in the coffin comes when the restaurant is forced to close its doors. The exact reasons aren't clear, but it's likely a combination of financial struggles, bad publicity, and the ongoing incidents involving the animatronics. The closure marks the end of the original Freddy Fazbear's Pizza location, a place that was once a beloved family entertainment center but has since become a symbol of tragedy and horror. The animatronics are left behind, abandoned in the closed restaurant. They sit in the dark, silent and unmoving, but far from inactive. The spirits haunting them are still there, trapped and restless, waiting for the next chapter in their story. The closure of the FNAF 1 location doesn't mean the end of Freddy Fazbear's Pizza, though. It's just the beginning of a much larger saga. The events at the original restaurant set the stage for future investigations and discoveries about the Fazbear franchise's dark history. Mike Schmidt's experiences are just one piece of the puzzle, a glimpse into the horrors that lie beneath the surface of Fazbear Entertainment. The animatronics haunting, the missing children incident, and the company's attempts to cover it all up are threads that will continue to unravel in the years to come. And while the original Freddy Fazbear's Pizza may be gone, its legacy and its ghosts will linger on. The animatronics themselves become a symbol of the franchise's dark past. Freddy, Bonnie, Chica, and Foxy are more than just characters in a children's restaurant. They're vessels for the souls of the murdered children, trapped and seeking justice or revenge. Their haunting is a reminder of the tragedy that occurred within the walls of Freddy Fazbear's Pizza and a warning of the horrors that lie ahead. The closure of the original location is just the first domino in a chain of events that will lead to further investigations, more hauntings, and the eventual unraveling of Fazbear Entertainment's secrets. As for Mike Schmidt, his story doesn't end with his firing. If anything, it's just the beginning. His experiences at Freddy Fazbear's Pizza have left him with more questions than answers, and he's determined to uncover the truth. Whether he's driven by curiosity, a sense of justice, or something darker, Mike's investigation into the Fazbear franchise's secrets will lead him down a path filled with danger, mystery, and horror. The events at the FNAF 1 location are just the first chapter in a much larger story, and Mike is about to discover just how deep the rabbit hole goes. The closure of the original Freddy Fazbear's Pizza location marks the end of an era, but it's far from the end of the story. The animatronics, still haunted by the spirits of the murdered children, remain in the abandoned restaurant, waiting for someone to uncover their secrets. The events that transpired there, the missing children incident, the hauntings, and Mike Schmidt's harrowing nights, are just the beginning of a much larger mystery. The Fazbear franchise's dark history is far from over, and the ghosts of Freddy Fazbear's Pizza are just the first to reveal themselves. The next chapter in the story is about to begin, and it promises to be even darker than the last. The Freddy Fazbear's Pizza saga was supposed to be over. The original location had been abandoned for decades, the rumors of its horrors fading into urban legend. But in the 2020s, someone decided to dig it all back up, literally. Enter Fazbear's Fright, a horror attraction built to capitalize on the gruesome myths surrounding Freddy Fazbear's Pizza. It was a place designed to scare, to entertain, to profit off the ghost stories that had lingered in the public imagination for years. What they didn't realize was that some of those stories weren't just stories. Some of them were very, very real. Fazbear's Fright was the brainchild of a group of entrepreneurs who saw an opportunity in the public's morbid curiosity. They scavenged abandoned Freddy Fazbear's Pizza locations, collecting old animatronic parts, posters, and other memorabilia to create an authentic and terrifying experience. The goal was simple: recreate the eerie atmosphere of the original pizzeria and turn it into a haunted house. But in their hunt for artifacts, they stumbled across something far more sinister than they bargained for. One of the employees, a guy known only as Phone Dude, was tasked with finding anything that could add to the attraction's authenticity. He was the kind of guy who treated the whole thing like a treasure hunt, cracking jokes and treating the dark history of Freddy Fazbear's Pizza like a game. But his attitude changed when he discovered something in a boarded-up room at one of the old locations. Inside was Springtrap, a decaying animatronic suit that looked like it had been through hell, and in a way it had. Springtrap wasn't just an old suit, it was a tomb. Inside, it was the remains of William Afton, the man behind the murders that had haunted Freddy Fazbear's Pizza for years. Afton had been trapped in the suit decades earlier after a failed attempt to dismantle the animatronics. The spring lock mechanism, a deadly system that allowed the suit to double as both an animatronic and a wearable costume, had malfunctioned, crushing him and leaving him for dead. Except he wasn't dead, not entirely. Somehow Afton had survived, his consciousness fused with the animatronic, and now he was about to be unleashed once again. Phone Dude didn't know any of this, of course. To him, Springtrap was a gold mine, a real haunted animatronic that would be the star attraction of Fazbear's Fright. He brought it back to the horror attraction, where it was placed front and center, advertised as the ultimate scare. What he didn't realize was that Springtrap wasn't just a prop. It was a predator, and it was about to wake up. Around this time, a new night guard was hired to oversee Fazbear's Fright. This wasn't just any night guard. This was Michael Afton, William's son. Michael had been on a personal mission for years, trying to undo the damage his father had caused. He'd worked at multiple Freddy Fazbear's locations, endured countless horrors, and even survived being scooped and used as a living shell by his sister, Elizabeth, who had become the animatronic circus baby. Michael was a man with nothing left to lose, driven by guilt and a need for redemption. And now he was about to come face to face with the source of all his pain, his father. When Michael first encountered Springtrap, he recognized it immediately. The suit, the decay, the eerie stillness, it was unmistakable. But what shocked him was the realization that his father was still alive inside it. William Afton, the man who had caused so much suffering, was still conscious, still malevolent, and still very much a threat. For Michael, this wasn't just a nightmare, it was personal. William, for his part, was just as driven as his son. Trapped in the Springtrap suit, he had spent years in isolation, his mind warped by pain and hatred. Now, free from the boarded up room, he was determined to continue his reign of terror. He stalked Michael throughout Fazbear's Fright, using the attraction's labyrinthine layout to his advantage. The horror attraction, designed to scare its visitors, had become a hunting ground. But Springtrap wasn't the only threat Michael faced. Fazbear's Fright was a mess of faulty equipment and cheap construction, and it began to take a toll on his mind. Phantom animatronics, hallucinations of withered, ghostly versions of the original Freddy Fazbear characters started appearing to him during his shifts. These weren't real animatronics, but they were terrifying nonetheless, manifestations of Michael's trauma and the deteriorating state of the attraction. They added another layer of psychological torment to an already unbearable situation. Amidst the chaos, Michael began to uncover clues about the dark history of Freddy Fazbear's Pizza. Scattered throughout Fazbear's Fright were audio logs and old recordings, remnants of the past that hinted at the true extent of William Afton's crimes. These recordings were pieces of a puzzle, fragments of a story that Michael had been trying to piece together for years. They confirmed what he already suspected. His father was a monster, and the legacy of Freddy Fazbear's Pizza was built on a foundation of blood and lies. As Michael delved deeper into the recordings, he began to understand the full scope of what had happened. The murders, the animatronics, the experiments, it was all connected, and it all led back to William. But understanding the past didn't make the present any easier. If anything, it made it worse. Michael was trapped in a nightmare of his father's making, forced to confront the man who had destroyed his family and countless others. Fazbear's Fright was supposed to be a place of thrills and chills, a way to turn tragedy into entertainment. But for Michael, it was something else entirely. It was a reckoning, a confrontation with the man who had caused so much pain, and it was far from over. Because while Fazbear's Fright was falling apart around him, Springtrap was still out there, waiting, watching, and planning his next move. The horror attraction was crumbling, both literally and figuratively. The faulty equipment, the phantom animatronics, the constant presence of Springtrap, it was all building to a breaking point, and when that point came, it would change everything. But for now, Michael was trapped in the nightmare, fighting to survive and searching for a way to end his father's reign of terror once and for all. The story of Fazbear's Fright was far from finished, and the next chapter would be even darker than the last. Fazbear's Fright was a ticking time bomb from the start. The attraction's wiring was a mess, slapped together on a shoestring budget, and the maintenance was practically non-existent. Lights flickered, animatronics glitched, and strange noises echoed through the halls. It wasn't just creepy, it was dangerous. But for Michael Afton, Working there was a chance to uncover the truth. He'd already pieced together fragments of the missing children incident, the event that had haunted Freddy Fazbear's Pizza for decades. Now he was digging deeper, and what he found was horrifying. The man behind the murders was his own father, William Afton, the man who'd become Springtrap. Michael wasn't just there to collect a paycheck, he was there to confront his father, and he got his chance. William, still trapped in the Springtrap suit, tried to escape Fazbear's fright. But Michael wasn't about to let that happen. He knew what his father was capable of, and he wasn't going to let him slip away again. Michael's actions kept Springtrap contained, but they also put him in danger. The animatronic was unpredictable, and the attraction's faulty systems only made things worse. Meanwhile, the management at Fazbear's Fright was facing a dilemma. They discovered Springtrap's true nature. He wasn't just a creepy animatronic, he was a killer. But shutting him down would mean losing their star attraction, so they made a choice. They kept it quiet, prioritizing profits over safety. It was a decision that would have devastating consequences. As Michael continued his investigation, he uncovered more than just his father's crimes. He found evidence of Fazbear Entertainment's cover-ups, their attempts to erase the company's dark past. They'd lied, destroyed records, and paid off anyone who got too close to the truth. It was a web of deceit that stretched back decades, and Michael was determined to expose it. But time was running out. The faulty wiring that had plagued Fazbear's Fright from the beginning was about to spark a disaster. Whether it was an accident or sabotage is still unclear, but the result was the same. A fire broke out, engulfing the attraction in flames. Michael managed to escape, but Springtrap wasn't so easily defeated. He emerged from the wreckage, scarred but alive. Fazbear's Fright burned to the ground, leaving nothing but ash and rumors. The incident became another urban legend, another chapter in the twisted history of Freddy Fazbear's Pizza. And Springtrap, the monster at the center of it all, walked away, ready to continue his reign of terror. The fire at Fazbear's Fright was a turning point. It marked the end of one era and the beginning of another. For Michael, it was a reminder of the horrors he'd faced, and the horrors still to come. For William Afton, it was proof that even death couldn't stop him. And for Fazbear Entertainment, it was another scandal to bury, another secret to keep. But secrets have a way of coming to light, and the truth about Fazbear's Fright was no exception. The fire didn't just destroy the attraction, it exposed the rot at the heart of the company. And as the ashes settled, one thing became clear. The nightmare was far from over. Michael's discovery of the missing children incident was a pivotal moment. It wasn't just about uncovering the truth. It was about understanding the scope of his father's crimes. The incident, which had occurred decades earlier, was the catalyst for everything that followed. 5 children had gone missing at Freddy Fazbear's Pizza, and their deaths had been covered up. William Afton was the man behind it all, luring the children away and killing them in cold blood. For Michael, learning the truth was a shock. He'd known his father was capable of terrible things, but this was something else entirely. It wasn't just a single act of violence. It was a pattern, a legacy of death that had haunted the Afton family for years. And now, Michael was determined to put an end to it. William's attempt to escape Fazbear's Fright was a desperate move. He'd been trapped in the Springtrap suit for years, his body fused with the metal endoskeleton. But he wasn't just a prisoner, he was a predator, and he saw the attraction as his hunting ground. When he realized Michael was onto him, he tried to flee, but Michael was ready. He blocked William's path, forcing him back into the shadows. It was a dangerous game. Michael knew his father was cunning, and he knew the Springtrap suit gave him an advantage. But he also knew he couldn't let William escape. If he did, more people would die. So Michael stayed close, keeping watch over his father, even as the attraction around them fell apart. The management's decision to hide Springtrap's true nature was a crucial misstep. They knew he was dangerous, but they chose to ignore it. They saw him as a draw, a way to lure in customers and make a profit, but their greed blinded them to the risk. They didn't realize they were playing with fire, literally. Michael's investigation into Fazbear Entertainment's cover ups revealed a disturbing pattern. The company had been hiding the truth for years, burying evidence and silencing anyone who spoke out. They'd lied about the missing children incident, about the dangers of the animatronics, about everything. And they'd done it all to protect their bottom line. The fire that destroyed Fazbear's Frights was a disaster waiting to happen. The wiring was a mess, the equipment was faulty, and the building was a death trap. When the flames broke out, they spread quickly, consuming everything in their path. Michael barely made it out alive, but Springtrap wasn't so lucky, or so it seemed. In the aftermath, it became clear that Springtrap had survived. He emerged from the wreckage, battered but still functional. It was a testament to his resilience and a reminder of the threat he posed. The fire had destroyed Fazbear's Fright, but it hadn't stopped William Afton. The incident became another chapter in the legend of Freddy Fazbear's Pizza. People whispered about the fire, about the animatronic that had walked out of the flames. It was a story that fed into the mystery, adding another layer to the horror. And for Michael, it was a reminder of the fight he still had ahead. The fire at Fazbear's Fright was a turning point in the story of Freddy Fazbear's Pizza. It marked the end of one chapter and the beginning of another. For Michael, it was a moment of reckoning, a chance to confront his father's legacy. For William Afton, it was a sign that he wasn't done yet. And for Fazbear Entertainment, it was another scandal to bury, another secret to keep. But secrets have a way of coming to light, and the truth about Fazbear's Fright was no exception. The fire didn't just destroy the attraction, it exposed the rot at the heart of the company. And as the ashes settled, one thing became clear. The nightmare was far from over. Michael's discovery of the missing children incident was a pivotal moment. It wasn't just about uncovering the truth, it was about understanding the scope of his father's crimes. The incident, which had occurred decades earlier, was the catalyst for everything that followed. 5 children had gone missing at Freddy Fazbear's Pizza, and their deaths had been covered up. William Afton was the man behind it all, luring the children away and killing them in cold blood. For Michael, learning the truth was a shock. He'd known his father was capable of terrible things, but this was something else entirely. It wasn't just a single act of violence. It was a pattern, a legacy of death that had haunted the Afton family for years. And now, Michael was determined to put an end to it. William's attempt to escape Fazbear's Fright was a desperate move. He'd been trapped in the Springtrap suit for years, his body fused with the metal endoskeleton. But he wasn't just a prisoner, he was a predator, and he saw the attraction as his hunting ground. When he realized Michael was onto him, he tried to flee, but Michael was ready. He blocked William's path, forcing him back into the shadows. It was a dangerous game. Michael knew his father was cunning, and he knew the Springtrap suit gave him an advantage. But he also knew he couldn't let William escape. If he did, more people would die. So Michael stayed close, keeping watch over his father even as the attraction around them fell apart. The management's decision to hide Springtrap's true nature was a crucial misstep. They knew he was dangerous, but they chose to ignore it. They saw him as a draw, a way to lure in customers and make a profit, but their greed blinded them to the risk. They didn't realize they were playing with fire, literally. Michael's investigation into Fazbear Entertainment's cover-ups revealed a disturbing pattern. The company had been hiding the truth for years, burying evidence and silencing anyone who spoke out. They'd lied about the missing children incident, about the dangers of the animatronics, about everything. And they'd done it all to protect their bottom line. The fire that destroyed Fazbear's Fright was a disaster waiting to happen. The wiring was a mess, the equipment was faulty, and the building was a death trap. When the flames broke out, they spread quickly, consuming everything in their path. Michael barely made it out alive, but Springtrap wasn't so lucky, or so it seemed. In the aftermath, it became clear that Springtrap had survived. He emerged from the wreckage, battered but still functional. It was a testament to his resilience and a reminder of the threat he posed. The fire had destroyed Fazbear's Fright, but it hadn't stopped William Afton. The incident became another chapter in the legend of Freddy Fazbear's Pizza. People whispered about the fire, about the animatronic that had walked out of the flames. It was a story that fed into the mystery, adding another layer to the horror. And for Michael, it was a reminder of the fight he still had ahead. The fire at Fazbear's Fright was a turning point in the story of Freddy Fazbear's Pizza. It marked the end of one chapter and the beginning of another. For Michael, it was a moment of reckoning, a chance to confront his father's legacy. For William Afton, it was a sign that he wasn't done yet. And for Fazbear Entertainment, it was another scandal to bury, another secret to keep. But secrets have a way of coming to light, and the truth about Fazbear's Fright was no exception. The fire didn't just destroy the attraction, it exposed the rot at the heart of the company. And as the ashes settled, one thing became clear. The nightmare was far from over. The year is the 2020s, and William Afton, the man behind the horrors of Freddy Fazbear's Pizza, is at it again. But this time, it's different. This time, he's not hiding behind the facade of a family-friendly pizzeria. No, this time, he's gone underground, literally. And what he's building there will change everything. But let's start at the beginning. William Afton, ever the innovator, designed Circus Baby's Pizza World. On the surface, it's a bright, cheerful place meant to attract children with its colorful animatronics and playful atmosphere. But beneath the surface, it's something far darker. William's true goal isn't to entertain children, it's to capture them, and he's built the perfect tools for the job, the Funtime animatronics. These aren't your typical singing robots. They're advanced, sophisticated machines designed for one purpose, to lure and trap children. There's Circus Baby, the star of the show, Ballora, the graceful dancer, Funtime Freddy, the jokester, and Funtime Foxy, the sly trickster. Each one is equipped with features like voice mimicry, parental tracking, and even built-in storage compartments, features that make them perfect for William's twisted plans. Circus Baby's Pizza World opens to much fanfare, but the excitement doesn't last long. William's daughter, Elizabeth Afton, is drawn to Circus Baby. Despite her father's warnings, she approaches the animatronic. What happens next is tragic. Circus Baby's claw mechanism activates, killing Elizabeth instantly. It's a moment that changes everything. The pizzeria is shut down, and William's plans are thrown into chaos. But William isn't one to let a setback stop him. He repurposes the facility, moving it underground and rebranding it as Circus Baby's Entertainment and Rental. This new facility isn't a public attraction. It's a hidden operation where the Funtime animatronics are stored and rented out for private parties. It's a clever move, allowing William to continue his experiments away from prying eyes. Enter Michael Afton, William's son. Michael, using the alias Mike Schmidt, takes a job at Circus Baby's Entertainment and Rental. His task is simple: monitor and maintain the animatronics during his night shifts. But nothing about this place is simple. The animatronics are erratic, unpredictable. Circus Baby, in particular, begins to communicate with Michael, hinting at her sentience and the spirit of Elizabeth trapped within her. It's a chilling revelation, one that suggests Williams' experiments have gone further than anyone could have imagined. And then there's Ballora and the other Funtime animatronics. Their behavior is increasingly erratic, suggesting they too are possessed by restless spirits. As Michael delves deeper into the facility, he discovers the Scooper, a device designed to remove endoskeletons from animatronics. It's a grim tool, one that speaks to the dark purposes of this place. But what does it mean for Michael? And what does it mean for the spirits trapped within the animatronics? The answers to these questions will shape the events to come, but for now, Michael is left to navigate the shadows of Circus Baby's entertainment and rental, uncovering the truth one piece at a time. Williams' designs are always intricate, always layered with meaning. Circus Baby's Pizza World was no exception. The animatronics were not just machines, they were instruments of his will. Circus Baby, with her bright colors and cheerful demeanor, was designed to be irresistible to children. But her charm was a facade. Inside her was a complex mechanism capable of capturing a child with precision and efficiency. Ballora, the elegant dancer, was no different. Her graceful movements masked a sinister purpose. Funtime Freddy and Funtime Foxy, too, were equipped with features that made them perfect for Williams' plans. Each animatronic was a piece of a larger puzzle, a puzzle that William was determined to solve. The opening of Circus Baby's Pizza World was a moment of triumph for William. He had created something new, something unique. But that triumph was short-lived. Elizabeth's death was a turning point. It was a moment of personal loss, but it was also a moment of reckoning. The incident exposed the dangers of William's creations, forcing him to shut down the pizzeria. But William was not one to give up. He saw an opportunity in the tragedy, a chance to take his experiments to the next level. By moving the facility underground and rebranding it as Circus Baby's Entertainment and Rental, he was able to continue his work in secret. It was a bold move, one that would have far-reaching consequences. Michael Afton's decision to take a job at Circus Baby's Entertainment and Rental was a pivotal moment. Using the alias Mike Schmidt, he entered a world of shadows and secrets. His task was straightforward: monitor and maintain the animatronics during his night shifts. But the reality was anything but straightforward. The animatronics were unpredictable, their behavior increasingly erratic. Circus Baby, in particular, began to communicate with Michael, hinting at her sentience and the spirit of Elizabeth within her. It was a chilling revelation, one that suggested William's experiments had gone further than anyone could have imagined. Ballora and the other Funtime animatronics were no less troubling. Their movements were erratic, their actions unpredictable. It was as if they were possessed by restless spirits, driven by some unseen force. Michael's discovery of the Scooper added another layer of complexity to the situation. The Scooper was a grim tool, designed to remove endoskeletons from animatronics. But what did it mean for Michael? And what did it mean for the spirits trapped within the animatronics? The answers to these questions were unclear, but one thing was certain: Michael was in over his head. As Michael navigated the shadows of Circus Baby's Entertainment and Rental, he began to uncover the truth. The facility was more than just a storage and rental service. It was a place of experimentation, of darkness. The animatronics were not just machines, they were vessels for something far more sinister. Circus Baby's communication with Michael was a clue, a hint at the sentience within her. Elizabeth's spirit, trapped within the animatronic, was a testament to the lengths William was willing to go to achieve his goals. Ballora's erratic behavior was another piece of the puzzle. Her graceful movements masked a darker purpose, one that suggested she, too, was possessed by a restless spirit. Funtime Freddy and Funtime Foxy were no different. Their actions were unpredictable, their motives unclear. It was as if they were driven by some unseen force, a force that Michael was only beginning to understand. The scooper, with its grim purpose, was a reminder of the darkness that lay at the heart of Circus Baby's entertainment and rental. It was a tool designed for a specific purpose, but its implications were far reaching. What did it mean for Michael, and what did it mean for the spirits trapped within the animatronics? The answers to these questions were unclear, but one thing was certain: Michael was walking a dangerous path. As Michael continued his night shifts, he began to piece together the truth. Circus Baby's entertainment and rental was more than just a facility. It was a place of experimentation, of darkness. The animatronics were not just machines, they were vessels for something far more sinister. Circus Baby's communication with Michael was a clue, a hint at the sentience within her. Elizabeth's spirit, trapped within the animatronic, was a testament to the length William was willing to go to achieve his goals. Bellora's erratic behavior was another piece of the puzzle. Her graceful movements masked a darker purpose, one that suggested she, too, was possessed by a restless spirit. Funtime Freddy and Funtime Foxy were no different. Their actions were unpredictable, their motives unclear. It was as if they were driven by some unseen force, a force that Michael was only beginning to understand. The scooper, with its grim purpose, was a reminder of the darkness that lay at the heart of Circus Baby's entertainment and rental. It was a tool designed for a specific purpose, but its implications were far-reaching. What did it mean for Michael, and what did it mean for the spirits trapped within the animatronics? The answers to these questions were unclear, but one thing was certain: Michael was walking a dangerous path. As Michael continued his night shifts, he began to piece together the truth. Circus Baby's entertainment and rental was more than just a facility. It was a place of experimentation, of darkness. The animatronics were not just machines, they were vessels for something far more sinister. Circus Baby's communication with Michael was a clue, a hint at the sentience within her. Elizabeth's spirit, trapped within the animatronic, was a testament to the lengths William was willing to go to achieve his goals. Bellora's erratic behavior was another piece of the puzzle. Her graceful movements masked a darker purpose, one that suggested she, too, was possessed by a restless spirit. Funtime Freddy and Funtime Foxy were no different. Their actions were unpredictable, their motives unclear. It was as if they were driven by some unseen force, a force that Michael was only beginning to understand. The scooper, with its grim purpose, was a reminder of the darkness that lay at the heart of Circus Baby's entertainment and rental. It was a tool designed for a specific purpose, but its implications were far-reaching. What did it mean for Michael, and what did it mean for the spirits trapped within the animatronics? The answers to these questions were unclear, but one thing was certain: Michael was walking a dangerous path. As Michael continued his night shifts, he began to piece together the truth. Circus Baby's entertainment and rental was more than just a facility. It was a place of experimentation, of darkness. The animatronics were not just machines, they were vessels for something far more sinister. Circus Baby's communication with Michael was a clue, a hint at the sentience within her. Elizabeth's spirit, trapped within the animatronic, was a testament to the lengths William was willing to go to achieve his goals. Bellora's erratic behavior was another piece of the puzzle. Her graceful movements masked a darker purpose, one that suggested she, too, was possessed by a restless spirit. Funtime Freddy and Funtime Foxy were no different. Their actions were unpredictable, their motives unclear. It was as if they were driven by some unseen force, a force that Michael was only beginning to understand. The scooper, with its grim purpose, was a reminder of the darkness that lay at the heart of circus babies' entertainment and rental. It was a tool designed for a specific purpose, but its implications were far reaching. What did it mean for Michael? And what did it mean for the spirits trapped within the animatronics? The answers to these questions were unclear, but one thing was certain: Michael was walking a dangerous path. As Michael continued his night shifts, he began to piece together the truth. Circus Baby's entertainment and rental was more than just a facility. It was a place of experimentation, of darkness. The animatronics were not just machines, they were vessels for something far more sinister. Circus Baby's communication with Michael was a clue, a hint at the sentience within her. Elizabeth's spirit, trapped within the animatronic, was a testament to the lengths William was willing to go to achieve his goals. Bellora's erratic behavior was another piece of the puzzle. Her graceful movements masked a darker purpose, one that suggested she, too, was possessed by a restless spirit. Funtime Freddy and Funtime Foxy were no different. Their actions were unpredictable, their motives unclear. It was as if they were driven by some unseen force, a force that Michael was only beginning to understand. The scooper, with its grim purpose, was a reminder of the darkness that lay at the heart of Circus Baby's entertainment and rental. It was a tool designed for a specific purpose, but its implications were far-reaching. What did it mean for Michael, and what did it mean for the spirits trapped within the animatronics? The answers to these questions were unclear, but one thing was certain: Michael was walking a dangerous path. As Michael continued his night shifts, he began to piece together the truth. Circus Baby's entertainment and rental was more than just a facility. It was a place of experimentation, of darkness. The animatronics were not just machines. They were vessels for something far more sinister. Circus Baby's communication with Michael was a clue, a hint at the sentience within her. Elizabeth's spirit, trapped within the animatronic, was a testament to the lengths William was willing to go to achieve his goals. Bellora's erratic behavior was another piece of the puzzle. Her graceful movements masked a darker purpose, one that suggested she, too, was possessed by a restless spirit. Funtime Freddy and Funtime Foxy were no different. Their actions were unpredictable, their motives unclear. It was as if they were driven by some unseen force, a force that Michael was only beginning to understand. The scooper, with its grim purpose, was a reminder of the darkness that lay at the heart of Circus Baby's entertainment and rental. It was a tool designed for a specific purpose, but its implications were far-reaching. What did it mean for Michael, and what did it mean for the spirits trapped within the animatronics? The answers to these questions were unclear, but one thing was certain: Michael was walking a dangerous path. As Michael continued his night shifts, he began to piece together the truth. Circus Baby's entertainment and rental was more than just a facility. It was a place of experimentation, of darkness. The animatronics were not just machines. They were vessels for something far more sinister. Circus Baby's communication with Michael was a clue, a hint at the sentience within her. Elizabeth's spirit, trapped within the animatronic, was a testament to the lengths William was willing to go to achieve his goals. Bellora's erratic behavior was another piece of the puzzle. Her graceful movements masked a darker purpose, one that suggested she, too, was possessed by a restless spirit. Funtime Freddy and Funtime Foxy were no different. Their actions were unpredictable, their motives unclear. It was as if they were driven by some unseen force, a force that Michael was only beginning to understand. The scooper, with its grim purpose, was a reminder of the darkness that lay at the heart of Circus Baby's entertainment and rental. It was a tool designed for a specific purpose, but its implications were far-reaching. What did it mean for Michael, and what did it mean for the spirits trapped within the animatronics? The answers to these questions were unclear, but one thing was certain: Michael was walking a dangerous path. As Michael continued his night shifts, he began to piece together the truth. Circus Baby's entertainment and rental was more than just a facility. It was a place of experimentation, of darkness. The animatronics were not just machines, they were vessels for something far more sinister. Circus Baby's communication with Michael was a clue, a hint at the sentience within her. Elizabeth's spirit, trapped within the animatronic, was a testament to the lengths William was willing to go to achieve his goals. Bellora's erratic behavior was another piece of the puzzle. Her graceful movements masked a darker purpose, one that suggested she, too, was possessed by a restless spirit. Funtime Freddy and Funtime Foxy were no different. Their actions were unpredictable, their motives unclear. It was as if they were driven by some unseen force, a force that Michael was only beginning to understand. The scooper, with its grim purpose, was a reminder of the darkness that lay at the heart of Circus Baby's entertainment and rental. It was a tool designed for a specific purpose, but its implications were far-reaching. What did it mean for Michael, and what did it mean for the spirits trapped within the animatronics? The answers to these questions were unclear, but one thing was certain: Michael was walking a dangerous path. As Michael continued his night shifts, he began to piece together the truth. Circus Baby's entertainment and rental was more than just a facility. It was a place of experimentation, of darkness. The animatronics were not just machines, they were vessels for something far more sinister. Circus Baby's communication with Michael was a clue, a hint at the sentience within her. Elizabeth's spirit, trapped within the animatronic, was a testament to the lengths William was willing to go to achieve his goals. Bellora's erratic behavior was another piece of the puzzle. Her graceful movements masked a darker purpose, one that suggested she, too, was possessed by a restless spirit. Funtime Freddy and Funtime Foxy were no different. Their actions were unpredictable, their motives unclear. It was as if they were driven by some unseen force, a force that Michael was only beginning to understand. The scooper, with its grim purpose, was a reminder of the darkness that lay at the heart of Circus Baby's entertainment and rental. It was a tool designed for a specific purpose, but its implications were far-reaching. What did it mean for Michael, and what did it mean for the spirits trapped within the animatronics? The answers to these questions were unclear, but one thing was certain: Michael was walking a dangerous path. As Michael continued his night shifts, he began to piece together the truth. Circus Baby's entertainment and rental was more than just a facility. It was a place of experimentation, of darkness. The animatronics were not just machines, they were vessels for something far more sinister. Circus Baby's communication with Michael was a clue, a hint at the sentience within her. Elizabeth's spirit, trapped within the animatronic, was a testament to the lengths William was willing to go to achieve his goals. Bellora's erratic behavior was another piece of the puzzle. Her graceful movements masked a darker purpose, one that suggested she, too, was possessed by a restless spirit. Funtime Freddy and Funtime Foxy were no different. Their actions were unpredictable, their motives unclear. It was as if they were driven by some unseen force, a force that Michael was only beginning to understand. The scooper, with its grim purpose, was a reminder of the darkness that lay at the heart of Circus Baby's entertainment and rental. It was a tool designed for a specific purpose, but its implications were far-reaching. What did it mean for Michael, and what did it mean for the spirits trapped within the animatronics? The answers to these questions were unclear, but one thing was certain: Michael was walking a dangerous path. As Michael continued his night shifts, he began to piece together the truth. Circus Baby's entertainment and rental was more than just a facility. It was a place of experimentation, of darkness. The animatronics were not just machines, They were vessels for something far more sinister. Circus Baby's communication with Michael was a clue, a hint at the sentience within her. Elizabeth's spirit, trapped within the animatronic, was a testament to the lengths William was willing to go to achieve his goals. Bellora's erratic behavior was another piece of the puzzle. Her graceful movements masked a darker purpose, one that suggested she, too, was possessed by a restless spirit. Funtime Freddy and Funtime Foxy were no different. Their actions were unpredictable, their motives unclear. It was as if they were driven by some unseen force, a force that Michael was only beginning to understand. The scooper, with its grim purpose, was a reminder of the darkness that lay at the heart of Circus Baby's entertainment and rental. It was a tool designed for a specific purpose, but here's where things take a turn. The animatronics, led by Circus Baby, had a plan. They weren't just going to stay trapped underground. They wanted out, and they figured out a way to do it. By merging into a single entity, they became something new, Anard. This wasn't just a group of animatronics anymore. It was a collective consciousness, a twisted amalgamation of their personalities and desires. And their goal was clear: escape. To pull this off, they needed a disguise, something or someone to hide inside. Enter Michael Afton. He'd been following Circus Baby's instructions, trusting her guidance, unaware of the trap being laid. Enard lured him into the scooper room, a place designed for maintenance, but in this case it would serve a far darker purpose. The scooper wasn't just a tool for repairs. It was a machine capable of removing internal organs, and that's exactly what it did to Michael. This moment is pivotal. The scooper didn't just hollow out Michael's body, it paved the way for Ennard to take control. With Michael's organs removed, Ennard slipped inside, using his body as a vessel. It was a horrifying transformation, one that allowed Ennard to finally leave the facility. But this wasn't a clean escape. Michael's body wasn't built to house Ennard. It began to decay, slowly but surely, as Ennard used it to navigate the outside world. Eventually, Ennard abandoned Michael's decaying body in a back alley. It seemed like the end for Michael, but here's the twist. He didn't die. Somehow he survived. And the reason for this survival lies in something called remnant. Remnant is a mysterious substance in the FNAF universe, a byproduct of agonies and suffering that can bind souls to physical forms. In Michael's case, remnant kept him alive, even after Ennard left his body. This wasn't just a second chance, it was a mission. Michael vowed to find his father, William Afton, and confront him for the horrors he'd unleashed. Meanwhile, William Afton was already aware of Ennard's escape. He'd been experimenting with Remnant for years, trying to unlock its secrets. Ennard's success in using Michael's body to escape only fueled William's obsession. He saw the potential for immortality, a way to cheat death by harnessing the power of Remnant. This marked a new chapter in his experiments, one that would have far-reaching consequences for the Afton family and the broader FNAF lore. As William delved deeper into his research, the underground facility where it all began was abandoned. Left to decay, it became a forgotten relic of the Afton family's dark legacy. But the animatronics weren't done yet. Circus Baby, who had been a driving force behind Anar, began to seek independence. She separated from the collective, wanting control over her own destiny. This split left Ennard fragmented, no longer the cohesive entity it once was. Without Circus Baby, Ennard became a shadow of its former self, roaming aimlessly, a reminder of the chaos it had caused. Michael, on the other hand, was on a path of discovery. His journey led him to confront his father and the horrors of the Afton family legacy. This wasn't just about revenge. It was about understanding the truth behind the animatronics, the experiments, and the suffering they'd caused. Michael's survival, fueled by Remnant, made him a key player in the unfolding drama. He wasn't just a victim anymore, he was a catalyst for change. The events at Circus Baby's Entertainment and Rental set the stage for the broader FNAF lore. They introduced key concepts like Remnant and the Afton family's downfall. These weren't just isolated incidents, they were pieces of a larger puzzle, one that would shape the future of the franchise. The underground facility, now abandoned, became a symbol of the Afton family's hubris. Their experiments with Remnant had unintended consequences, leading to the creation of Ennard and the survival of Michael. Circus Baby's separation from Ennard marked a turning point. She was no longer part of the collective. She was her own entity, driven by a desire for control and independence. This shift had ripple effects, influencing the events that would follow. Ennard, now without Circus Baby, continued to roam, a fragmented remnant of its former self. It was a reminder of the chaos that had unfolded underground, a lingering threat in the FNAF universe. Michael's story, meanwhile, was far from over. His survival, thanks to Remnant, gave him a unique perspective on the horrors he'd faced. He wasn't just fighting for himself, he was fighting to uncover the truth about his family and the experiments that had shaped his life. This journey would lead him to confront his father, William Afton, and the legacy of the Afton family. It was a confrontation that would have lasting implications for the FNAF lore. The discovery of Remnant was a game changer. It wasn't just a scientific breakthrough, it was a moral dilemma. William Afton saw it as a path to immortality, but the cost was steep. The suffering it caused, the lives it destroyed, were a testament to the dangers of unchecked ambition. Michael's survival, fueled by Remnant, was a reminder of this. He was living proof of the power and peril of this mysterious substance. As the underground facility decayed, it became a symbol of the Afton family's downfall. Their experiments with Remnant had unleashed chaos, leading to the creation of Ennard and the survival of Michael. These events weren't just isolated incidents, they were part of a larger narrative, one that would shape the future of the FNAF universe. The Afton family's legacy was one of ambition, hubris, and tragedy, and Michael's journey was a key part of this story. Circus Baby's separation from Ennard marked a new chapter. She was no longer part of the collective. She was her own entity, driven by a desire for control and independence. This shift had ripple effects, influencing the events that would follow. Ennard, now without Circus Baby, continued to roam, a fragmented remnant of its former self. It was a reminder of the chaos that had unfolded underground, a lingering threat in the FNAF universe. Michael's story, meanwhile, was far from over. His survival, thanks to Remnant, gave him a unique perspective on the horrors he'd faced. He wasn't just fighting for himself, he was fighting to uncover the truth about his family and the experiments that had shaped his life. This journey would lead him to confront his father, William Afton, and the legacy of the Afton family. It was a confrontation that would have lasting implications for the FNAF lore. The discovery of Remnant was a game changer. It wasn't just a scientific breakthrough, it was a moral dilemma. William Afton saw it as a path to immortality, but the cost was steep. The suffering it caused, the lives it destroyed, were a testament to the dangers of unchecked ambition. Michael's survival, fueled by Remnant, was a reminder of this. He was living proof of the power and peril of this mysterious substance. As the underground facility decayed, it became a symbol of the Afton family's downfall. Their experiments with Remnant had unleashed chaos, leading to the creation of Ennard and the survival of Michael. These events weren't just isolated incidents, they were part of a larger narrative, one that would shape the future of the FNAF universe. The Afton family's legacy was one of ambition, hubris, and tragedy, and Michael's journey was a key part of this story. Circus Baby's separation from Ennard marked a new chapter. She was no longer part of the collective. She was her own entity, driven by a desire for control and independence. This shift had ripple effects, influencing the events that would follow. Ennard, now without Circus Baby, continued to roam, a fragmented remnant of its former self. It was a reminder of the chaos that had unfolded underground, a lingering threat in the FNAF universe. Michael's story, meanwhile, was far from over. His survival, thanks to Remnant, gave him a unique perspective on the horrors he'd faced. He wasn't just fighting for himself, he was fighting to uncover the truth about his family and the experiments that had shaped his life. This journey would lead him to confront his father, William Afton, and the legacy of the Afton family. It was a confrontation that would have lasting implications for the FNAF lore. The discovery of Remnant was a game changer. It wasn't just a scientific breakthrough, it was a moral dilemma. William Afton saw it as a path to immortality, but the cost was steep. The suffering it caused, the lives it destroyed, were a testament to the dangers of unchecked ambition. Michael's survival, fueled by Remnant, was a reminder of this. He was living proof of the power and peril of this mysterious substance. As the underground facility decayed, it became a symbol of the Afton family's downfall. Their experiments with Remnant had unleashed chaos, leading to the creation of Ennard and the survival of Michael. These events weren't just isolated incidents. They were part of a larger narrative, one that would shape the future of the FNAF universe. The Afton family's legacy was one of ambition, hubris, and tragedy, and Michael's journey was a key part of this story. Circus Baby's separation from Ennard marked a new chapter. She was no longer part of the collective. She was her own entity, driven by a desire for control and independence. This shift had ripple effects, influencing the events that would follow. Ennard, now without Circus Baby, continued to roam, a fragmented remnant of its former self. It was a reminder of the chaos that had unfolded underground, a lingering threat in the FNAF universe. Michael's story, meanwhile, was far from over. His survival, thanks to Remnant, gave him a unique perspective on the horrors he'd faced. He wasn't just fighting for himself, he was fighting to uncover the truth about his family and the experiments that had shaped his life. This journey would lead him to confront his father, William Afton, and the legacy of the Afton family. It was a confrontation that would have lasting implications for the FNAF lore. The discovery of Remnant was a game changer. It wasn't just a scientific breakthrough, it was a moral dilemma. William Afton saw it as a path to immortality, but the cost was steep. The suffering it caused, the lives it destroyed, were a testament to the dangers of unchecked ambition. Michael's survival, fueled by Remnant, was a reminder of this. He was living proof of the power and peril of this mysterious substance. As the underground facility decayed, it became a symbol of the Afton family's downfall. Their experiments with Remnant had unleashed chaos, leading to the creation of Ennard and the survival of Michael. These events weren't just isolated incidents. They were part of a larger narrative, one that would shape the future of the FNAF universe. The Afton family's legacy was one of ambition, hubris, and tragedy, and Michael's journey was a key part of this story. Circus Baby's separation from Ennard marked a new chapter. She was no longer part of the collective. She was her own entity, driven by a desire for control and independence. This shift had ripple effects, influencing the events that would follow. Ennard, now without Circus Baby, continued to roam, a fragmented remnant of its former self. It was a reminder of the chaos that had unfolded underground, a lingering threat in the FNAF universe. Michael's story, meanwhile, was far from over. His survival, thanks to Remnant, gave him a unique perspective on the horrors he'd faced. He wasn't just fighting for himself, he was fighting to uncover the truth about his family and the experiments that had shaped his life. This journey would lead him to confront his father, William Afton, and the legacy of the Afton family. It was a confrontation that would have lasting implications for the FNAF lore. The discovery of Remnant was a game changer. It wasn't just a scientific breakthrough, it was a moral dilemma. William Afton saw it as a path to immortality, but the cost was steep. The suffering it caused, the lives it destroyed, were a testament to the dangers of unchecked ambition. Michael's survival, fueled by Remnant, was a reminder of this. He was living proof of the power and peril of this mysterious substance. As the underground facility decayed, it became a symbol of the Afton family's downfall. Their experiments with Remnant had unleashed chaos, leading to the creation of Ennard and the survival of Michael. These events weren't just isolated incidents. They were part of a larger narrative, one that would shape the future of the FNAF universe. The Afton family's legacy was one of ambition, hubris, and tragedy, and Michael's journey was a key part of this story. Circus Baby's separation from Ennard marked a new chapter. She was no longer part of the collective. She was her own entity, driven by a desire for control and independence. This shift had ripple effects, influencing the events that would follow. Ennard, now without Circus Baby, continued to roam, a fragmented remnant of its former self. It was a reminder of the chaos that had unfolded underground, a lingering threat in the FNAF universe. Michael's story, meanwhile, was far from over. His survival, thanks to Remnant, gave him a unique perspective on the horrors he'd faced. He wasn't just fighting for himself. He was fighting to uncover the truth about his family and the experiments that had shaped his life. This journey would lead him to confront his father, William Afton, and the legacy of the Afton family. It was a confrontation that would have lasting implications for the FNAF lore. The discovery of Remnant was a game changer. It wasn't just a scientific breakthrough, it was a moral dilemma. William Afton saw it as a path to immortality, but the cost was steep. The suffering it caused, the lives it destroyed, were a testament to the dangers of unchecked ambition. Michael's survival, fueled by Remnant, was a reminder of this. He was living proof of the power and peril of this mysterious substance. As the underground facility decayed, it became a symbol of the Afton family's downfall. Their experiments with Remnant had unleashed chaos, leading to the creation of Ennard and the survival of Michael. These events weren't just isolated incidents. They were part of a larger narrative, one that would shape the future of the FNAF universe. The Afton family's legacy was one of ambition, hubris, and tragedy, and Michael's journey was a key part of this story. Circus Baby's separation from Ennard marked a new chapter. She was no longer part of the collective. She was her own entity, driven by a desire for control and independence. This shift had ripple effects, influencing the events that would follow. Ennard, now without Circus Baby, continued to roam, a fragmented remnant of its former self. It was a reminder of the chaos that had unfolded underground, a lingering threat in the FNAF universe. Michael's story, meanwhile, was far from over. His survival, thanks to Remnant, gave him a unique perspective on the horrors he'd faced. He wasn't just fighting for himself, he was fighting to uncover the truth about his family and the experiments that had shaped his life. This journey would lead him to confront his father, William Afton, and the legacy of the Afton family. It was a confrontation that would have lasting implications for the FNAF lore. The discovery of Remnant was a game changer. It wasn't just a scientific breakthrough, it was a moral dilemma. William Afton saw it as a path to immortality, but the cost was steep. The suffering it caused, the lives it destroyed, were a testament to the dangers of unchecked ambition. Michael's survival, fueled by Remnant, was a reminder of this. He was living proof of the power and peril of this mysterious substance. As the underground facility decayed, it became a symbol of the Afton family's downfall. Their experiments with Remnant had unleashed chaos, leading to the creation of Ennard and the survival of Michael. These events weren't just isolated incidents, they were part of a larger narrative, one that would shape the future of the FNAF universe. The Afton family's legacy was one of ambition, hubris, and tragedy, and Michael's journey was a key part of this story. Circus Baby's separation from Ennard marked a new chapter. She was no longer part of the collective. She was her own entity, driven by a desire for control and independence. This shift had ripple effects in influencing the events that would follow. Ennard, now without Circus Baby, continued to roam, a fragmented remnant of its former self. It was a reminder of the chaos that had unfolded underground, a lingering threat in the FNAF universe. Michael's story, meanwhile, was far from over. His survival, thanks to Remnant, gave him a unique perspective on the horrors he'd faced. He wasn't just fighting for himself, he was fighting to uncover the truth about his family and the experiments that had shaped his life. This journey would lead him to confront his father, William Afton, and the legacy of the Afton family. It was a confrontation that would have lasting implications for the FNAF lore. The discovery of Remnant was a game changer. It wasn't just a scientific breakthrough, it was a moral dilemma. William Afton saw it as a path to immortality, but the cost was steep. The suffering it caused, the lives it destroyed, were a testament to the dangers of unchecked ambition. Michael's survival, fueled by Remnant, was a reminder of this. He was living proof of the power and peril of this mysterious substance. As the underground facility decayed, it became a symbol of the Afton family's downfall. Their experiments with Remnant had unleashed chaos, leading to the creation of Ennard and the survival of Michael. These events weren't just isolated incidents. They were part of a larger narrative, one that would shape the future of the FNAF universe. The Afton family's legacy was one of ambition, hubris, and tragedy, and Michael's journey was a key part of this story. Circus Baby's separation from Ennard marked a new chapter. She was no longer part of the collective. She was her own entity, driven by a desire for control and independence. This shift had ripple effects, influencing the events that would follow. Ennard, now without Circus Baby, continued to roam, a fragmented remnant of its former self. It was a reminder of the chaos that had unfolded underground, a lingering threat in the FNAF universe. Michael's story, meanwhile, was far from over. His survival, thanks to Remnant, gave him a unique perspective on the horrors he'd faced. He wasn't just fighting for himself. He was fighting to uncover the truth about his family and the experiments that had shaped his life. This journey would lead him to confront his father, William Afton, and the legacy of the Afton family. It was a confrontation that would have lasting implications for the FNAF lore. The discovery of Remnant was a game changer. It wasn't just a scientific breakthrough, it was a moral dilemma. William Afton saw it as a path to immortality, but the cost was steep. The year's the early 2020s, and the story of Freddy Fazbear's Pizza reaches its final chapter. This is where everything comes to a head, where the decades of secrets, tragedies, and horrors finally collide. But it doesn't start with a bang. It starts with a trap. And the man behind it? Henry Emily, the co-founder of Freddy Fazbear's Pizza, who's been quietly watching everything unfold from the shadows. After years of silence, Henry steps back into the fray with one goal: to end the nightmare he helped create. His plan? Freddy Fazbear's Pizzeria Simulator, a seemingly innocent restaurant that's anything but. Henry designs the Pizzeria Simulator as a lure, a carefully constructed facade to draw in the remaining rogue animatronics still haunting the world. But here's the twist. Michael Afton, Henry's old partner's son, has no idea what's really going on. Michael, still searching for answers and trying to undo the damage his father, William Afton, caused, takes a job as the pizzeria's manager. He thinks he's just running a business. He doesn't realize he's walking into a trap, and neither do the animatronics. The pizzeria quickly attracts three key figures: Scrap Baby, Molten Freddy, and Scrap Trap. Each of them is a relic of the past, rebuilt and reshaped by their own twisted histories. Scrap Baby, once Circus Baby, is a tragic figure. She's driven by a desire for redemption, haunted by the memory of Elizabeth Afton, the little girl whose soul she once contained. But her programming, her core directive to harm, hasn't gone away. She's a contradiction, torn between her humanity and her machinery. Molten Freddy, on the other hand, is pure chaos, an amalgamation of the fun-time animatronics. From Sister Location, Molten Freddy retains their aggressive, unpredictable nature. It's a hive of broken parts and restless spirits, and it has one goal: to cause as much destruction as possible. Then there's Scrap Trap. This is William Afton, the man behind it all, rebuilt and barely recognizable. After surviving the fire at Fazbear's Fright, William is more determined than ever to achieve immortality and maintain control over the animatronics. He's a shadow of his former self, but his ambition hasn't dimmed. Henry monitors everything from behind the scenes, pulling the strings to ensure the animatronics are contained. He knows this is his last chance to set things right, to end the cycle of violence that's plagued their lives for decades. But Michael, unaware of Henry's plan, is on the front lines. During his shifts, he encounters the salvaged animatronics, narrowly avoiding their attacks. It's a dangerous game of cat and mouse, with Michael trying to keep the pizzeria running while staying one step ahead of the deadly machines. As the days go by, Henry records a hidden message, a final confession and explanation of his plan. In it, he reveals his intention to end the Afton legacy once and for all, to free the souls trapped in the animatronics, and to bring closure to the horrors they've endured. It's a moment of clarity, a rare glimpse into the mind of a man who's been silent for so long. But the question remains, will his plan work? Let's break this down piece by piece, starting with Henry Emily. After years of absence, Henry reemerges with a singular focus: to clean up the mess he helped create. Freddy Fazbear's Pizzeria Simulator is his masterpiece, a carefully crafted trap disguised as a family-friendly restaurant. The pizzeria is designed to attract the remaining animatronics, drawing them in with the promise of prey. But Henry's not just targeting the animatronics. He's targeting William Afton, his former partner, and the architect of so much suffering. Henry's plan is meticulous, calculated, and ruthless. He's willing to sacrifice everything, including himself, to end the nightmare. Michael Afton, meanwhile, is still searching for answers. After the events of Sister Location, Michael has been trying to undo the damage his father caused. He takes the job at the Pizzeria Simulator, thinking it's just another step in his journey. He doesn't know it's a trap. Michael's role as manager puts him in direct contact with the salvaged animatronics, and it's here that the tension reaches its peak. Scrap Baby, Molten Freddy, and Scrap Trap are all drawn to the pizzeria, each with their own motivations and agendas. Michael's shifts are a constant battle for survival as he tries to keep the pizzeria running while avoiding the deadly machines lurking in the shadows. Scrap Baby is perhaps the most tragic of the three. Once Circus Baby, she's a reflection of Elizabeth Afton, the little girl whose soul she once contained. Scrap Baby is driven by a desire for redemption, but her programming, her core directive to harm, remains intact. She's a contradiction, torn between her humanity and her machinery. Her interactions with Michael are fraught with tension as she struggles to reconcile her past with her present. Molten Freddy, on the other hand, is pure chaos. An amalgamation of the fun-time animatronics from Sister Location, Molten Freddy retains their aggressive, unpredictable nature. It's a hive of broken parts and restless spirits, and it has one goal: to cause as much destruction as possible. Molten Freddy's presence in the pizzeria is a constant threat, always lurking, always waiting for the right moment to strike. Then there's Scrap Trap. This is William Afton, the man behind it all, rebuilt and barely recognizable. After surviving the fire at Fazbear's Fright, William is more determined than ever to achieve immortality and maintain control over the animatronics. He's a shadow of his former self, but his ambition hasn't dimmed. Scraptrap's interactions with Michael are charged with tension as father and son come face to face once again. Henry watches all of this unfold from behind the scenes, pulling the strings to ensure the animatronics are contained. He knows this is his last chance to set things right, to end the cycle of violence that's plagued their lives for decades. But Michael, unaware of Henry's plan, is on the front lines. During his shifts, he encounters the salvaged animatronics, narrowly avoiding their attacks. It's a dangerous game of cat and mouse, with Michael trying to keep the pizzeria running while staying one step ahead of the deadly machines. As the days go by, Henry records a hidden message, a final confession and explanation of his plan. In it, he reveals his intention to end the Afton legacy once and for all, to free the souls trapped in the animatronics, and to bring closure to the horrors they've endured. It's a moment of clarity, a rare glimpse into the mind of a man who's been silent for so long. But the question remains, will his plan work? The pizzeria simulator is more than just a trap. It's a culmination of everything that's come before, a final showdown between the forces of good and evil. Henry's plan is a gamble, a last-ditch effort to end the nightmare. But with Michael on the front lines and the salvaged animatronics closing in, the stakes have never been higher. This is the final chapter, the moment where everything comes to a head. And as the pieces fall into place, one thing becomes clear: there's no going back. But this is only part one of the pizzeria simulator story. The trap is set, the animatronics are in place, and Henry's plan is in motion. What happens next will determine the fate of everyone involved. Will Henry succeed in ending the nightmare, or will William Afton's legacy continue to haunt the world? The answers lie in the final moments of the pizzeria simulator, and we'll dive into that in part 2. For now, the stage is set, the players are in place, and the clock is ticking. The end is near, but the fight is far from over. Here's the continuation of the pizzeria simulator section, picking up right where part 1 left off. The pizzeria was a ticking time bomb. Every system, every vent, every hidden mechanism had been rigged for one purpose: to burn it all down. Henry Emily had built this place not as a fresh start, but as a funeral pyre, and Michael Afton, still unaware of the trap closing around him, was about to discover the truth. It started with the audio logs. Scattered throughout the building, these recordings were Henry's confession, his final message to the world, and to Michael specifically. As Michael pieced them together, the reality hit him like a gut punch. This wasn't a business. It was a slaughterhouse, and he was the bait. The animatronics he'd been salvaging, Scrap Baby, Molten Freddy, even the grotesque remains of his own father, now calling itself Scrap Trap, had been lured here for one reason: to be destroyed. Henry's voice in those logs was calm, resigned. He didn't gloat. He didn't even sound angry, just tired. In one recording,